welcome, and we'll go ahead and I'll call the meeting to order here. I guess I need to go ahead and establish quorum. Everybody's here. Almost.
Is Dr. Smith online?
Dr. Smith's on.
Roger that.
Roger that. I got you, Dr. Smith. Okay. All right, so we have quorum. So it's benefiting that we're at the gateway to the south at the State Office of Rural Health in Cordele on this important day, National Rural Health Day. And we've been here before. It's a great facility and venue, so we appreciate you having us. And great venue for yesterday's state meeting, which was well attended. And I thought really one of the best meetings. The whole audience was, everybody, all the stakeholders were engaged and great discussion. And then we broke out into our sessions with GCTE and the trauma medical directors, and there was a lot, at least I was at the TMD, tremendous discussion there. I heard for the other group as well. So kudos to everyone for participating. With that being said, we're fortunate to have Dr. Dean Burke, former Senator Dean Burke, with us today to open the meeting for us. Dr. Burke is now the Chief Medical Officer for the Department of Community Health. He was always a great supporter of ours in the Senate and well respected by health and policymakers. And I've called on him many times over the years when he was in the Senate. And he was always very helpful and just really had a good grasp of what was going on and a lot of wisdom. So Dr. Burke, please come forward.
Good morning. Welcome to South Georgia. Is this mic working? Do I need this one? I always enjoy the excuse to get out of Atlanta, and y'all provided me one today, so thank you for that. The other thing that I try to remind my colleagues is they call Cordele South Georgia, but I just drove 2 hours north to get here from Bainbridge, so they really don't know what South Georgia is. But anyway, again, welcome to our State Office of Rural Health. As Dr. Ashley said, I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Department of Community Health, which is a new role. I will have been there 2 years in January, and it's amazing how time flies. I'll report directly to the commissioner, and basically my role is to meddle in all his business from a clinical standpoint, to give him advice. If he pushes this lever, what's going to happen on the ground in patient care delivery, which when I was across the street from the agency at the Capitol with my legislative hat, I was the appropriations chair over healthcare and had the Department of Community Health budget. And, you know, we worked very closely together, but it was a sometimes contentious situation because, you know, I wanted them to move faster on some things and didn't understand why they were doing other things. And after 10 years of messing with it, I said, well, I'm just have to go over there and see what I can do in person rather than complaining about it. So I've enjoyed my time there. I tell people it's the best job in the world that you get to spend $20 billion of other people's money every year. I mean, you know, that's a pretty good gig. And for those of you that don't know, the Department of Community Health is the agency that's been designated by CMS to manage the state's Medicaid program, which is the largest portion of our budget. And also the state health benefit program, the state employee health plan is under our purview, as well as the facilities regulation and which is the surveying entity for nursing homes and hospitals, licensing as well. And we also do health planning, which is got the bad acronym CON attached to it, which has been in the news and been very contentious over the last several years. So we have a lot on our plate. There's procurement of the CMOs, the care management organizations that actually manage the low-income Medicaid program in Georgia, which covers, I think last count was about 1.4 million Georgians. So that procurement's soon to be announced, I hope before the end of the year, which don't tell anybody because that's still undercover because it's a procurement, but we should hopefully hear something soon. The couple of points I wanted to make besides the welcome is, number one, just a big thank you for this organization. Over my time in the legislature, obviously being a physician and being in a rural county in Decatur County in South Georgia, the inadequate access to trauma services is a huge issue. And I think Georgia nationally has been recognized as making huge progress there. And now we're one of the places people come to see how we're doing it rather than us trying to figure it out. And that comes from great leadership of this organization. And I want to thank y'all for all the time and effort that you put into keeping Georgians healthy when they're going about their daily lives. And, you know, this is just amazing to me, the progress we've made. The map that you've used very, very well for showing where the gaps are, you know, has closed in a lot. There's still some work to do, especially in rural Georgia to improve those level 3s and level 4s. And I know that that's been part of the discussion since you've been here, is trying to identify what more can be done. So consider us a partner. I know the governor has proclaimed today Rural Health Day, and we have a proclamation that I'm not going to read for two reasons. One, it's long, and two, because the type's so small I can't read it. But again, just know that we recognize the work that the State Office of Rural Health, which is one of my areas of supervision, is this office. And I'm proud of the small but mighty team that they have here, that they cover the state, because, you know, 80% of our state is rural, and it's a big state, and a lot of counties, a lot of facilities that fall under that rural designation. And we have been trying to improve our processes to make this office one of the best rural health offices in the country. So that's a big job. And Nita, as some of you know, was promoted to the director's role, and I've given her the responsibility of getting to know all these far-flung rural parts of Georgia. So if you call her and she's not in her office, then that's what she's supposed to be doing, is being out on the road and meeting with people and finding out what's happening in your neck of the woods. And, you know, we do, because they are grant experts, they have a lot of grants that are even not rural. So she's not just limited to rural, but that is her primary focus. So again, welcome to Cordele. Anything that we can do to make your stay here today better, let us know. And anything that I can do to help you as you go about your continuation of the great work you're doing to improve outcomes in Georgia is so important. So again, thank y'all for that. So thank you, Dr. Ashley, for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Burke.
I'd be glad to answer technical questions if anybody has any. I'll be here a couple hours.
That's good. Make a note of that if you get Dr. Burke over in the corner and ask him some tough questions. Okay, at this time, I'll turn it back over to Liz. I think we have some.
Sorry, that went down a lot easier than it went up this morning. Good morning, everyone, and I'll echo Dr. Burke's comments with Nita. So pleased that you've accepted this role, Nita. Thank you, and it's been a great partnership between our two entities. So we look forward to a lot more work to come. And We're gonna switch gears for just a moment here. And again, since it's National Rural Health Day, we want to do a little connect to purpose. And so we've invited Emily Brown. If you can come up to the podium. Emily is the Director of EMS and Trauma at South Georgia Medical Center, who goes by SGMC Health now. So Emily would like to share a little story with you all.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us here and allowing us to present this case study this morning. Rural trauma care is very important to me. I started my nursing career in a very small critical access hospital, about 15 minutes up the road from where Dr. Burke said he drove from this morning. And we started with 2 stretchers, and there was a curtain between that stretcher. And I worked my first trauma there, and it was very impactful for me. And you know, 20 plus years ago, you don't know what you don't know. And I've been very fortunate to be able to learn a lot about trauma care. And now you realize, you know, what the barriers were then and still are in rural trauma care. And I think it's very important, and I hope that I'm able to highlight some barriers, even in this case, regardless of the outcome that we faced. Lowndes County would not be considered necessarily rural. We have a lot of a high population there in Lowndes County of about 120,000 people. But where we sit, it is considered rural. And so I hope I'm able to highlight some barriers that we had this day with this case study, and really kind of connect the dots for how important trauma care is, organized trauma care, whether you're a trauma center or not in these areas, how important it is for organized trauma care to take place here, and how impactful that will be on the outcomes of your patients. I don't know if I have there you go. So just a little background about SGMC Health and our trauma. We are a state designated level 3 trauma center, and we received that designation in June of 2023. So we see about a little over 1,700 activations a year, and about 112 of those activations are what we consider our level 1 or our highest trauma activation. Our immediate coverage area there covers about 1,589 square miles, and that's what we cover with just our EMS services. So that spans over about 4 counties, and that's a lot of square miles to cover with your ambulances. And those total 4 counties have a total population of about 160,000, with about 120 of those residing in Lowndes County. You can see kind of where that little red pin there is. That's Lowndes County, and the star right there beside it is where this trauma occurred that I'm going to talk about in this case study. The other 2 marks there actually mark our nearest level 1 trauma centers in Georgia, which is Macon and then over in Savannah. And if you actually use that mileage, average mileage, and include the out-of-state trauma center that is about as close to us down in Gainesville, we still sit about an average of 120 miles from the nearest level 1 trauma center. So that is significant whenever you receive a trauma patient that's been severely injured. So the morning of this accident, this was a Saturday, and it happened October 24th, 2023, which was a little over a year ago. I specifically remember the weather this morning being very foggy, and I went back and actually looked at the actual weather report from that morning, and your visibility was very low. But for anybody that's familiar with your flight criteria, the ceiling that morning at the time of this accident was only 700 feet. And it stayed below 1,000 feet until 11:30 that morning, which means that we would never have gotten a helicopter to even be able to land at our hospital to come get this patient. This accident didn't happen in Brooks County, and Brooks County sits between Lowndes and Thomas County. But this accident actually occurred about 18 miles from SGMC in Valdosta, and he was probably about 38 miles from Thomasville, which is why the decision was made to bring him to Valdosta. This was an accident that occurred at an intersection, and this patient was traveling with one of his family members, went through the intersection, and they were actually T-boned by a full-size truck carrying a lot of heavy equipment, and all of the impact happened on the passenger side of the vehicle. It was actually so much intrusion that the front passenger seat folded almost in half. The patient was extricated before EMS arrival, and the accident happened about 7:30. So when that EMS department got there, I think the fire department had already extricated the patient. So we received a level 1 trauma activation from the scene from this EMS service. This was not our EMS service. It was a neighboring service at the time. And they told us at 8:15 that morning they were preparing to leave the scene, called our hospital report. At this time, we think they had already been on scene about 45 minutes with this patient. And then at 8:16, we paged out our level 1 trauma activation. That's our process at our hospital. It took them probably about another 30 minutes to 30 to 40 minutes for them to actually get him to our hospital. And while he was en route, there was no significant treatments done other than an IV. And they did have him immobilized and had him on a monitor. He did have an IV, did not receive any IV fluids. And really his abnormal vital sign of his heart rate 145 was super concerning to us along with the impact. So we did make that a level 1 trauma alert. When he arrived at our hospital at almost 9 o'clock, his GCS was 14. He was able to follow some commands, but he was confused. And you can see there that his blood pressure was 154/107, but his heart rate had already started to drop. And he was compensating respiratory-wise with a respiratory rate of 30. We did have our team at the bedside assembled because we had such a advance notice from the scene, which we love that. So we were able to get a lot of stuff done in that first 15 or 20 minutes of him being there. Chest and pelvis x-rays, the chest x-ray showed a lot of broken ribs on the right side, which again was the side of impact. He had displaced rib fractures from ribs 4 through 8, and then ribs 9 through 12 were non-displaced rib fractures with a pneumothorax. We did begin our mass transfusion protocol within about 10 minutes of him being there. And starting that mass transfusion protocol is going to be very significant to the outcome of this patient. Our surgeon arrived, but within about 15 minutes of his arrival, he did go into cardiac arrest. We inserted bilateral chest tubes, he was intubated, and we worked the code where he went into VTAC 4 times and was defibrillated, and we did obtain ROSC at 9:31. And we were able to stabilize him enough to get him to CT scan at about 9:47. Once in the scanner, there were multiple injuries that were noted on his CT scans. He had many liver lacerations, a very severe spleen laceration, a right kidney laceration, a right hemothorax, and then he had a retroperitoneal hematoma on the right side. All of that was actively hemorrhaging. We did assemble our own critical care transport team at this time. We started working on that. We do not have that dedicated to our hospital, so it's something that on a case-by-case basis we have to put together. And we do have quite a few critical care paramedics, but this paramedics, unless they have post-licensure skill set, cannot transfuse blood, so we have to get RNs and respiratory therapists to come. The patient did return from the CT scanner to the trauma bay where we placed an additional right-sided chest tube, which further helped that right pneumothorax. And then from 11 to 12:40, there were multiple attempts made to find transport for this patient. We were not ready to be able to put him in the back of our ambulance. We felt like he was not stable enough for a 2-hour ground transport. And we were still unable to get a helicopter there, even though we had acceptance from an out-of-state trauma center to accept the patient. We just could not find a way to get him there. So this patient, I'll tell you, is a member of the public safety family. And so for anybody that's ever taken care of anybody in that family, you know that when one is sick or injured, they are all sick or injured. And when they find out that they are all coming. So by this point, I was not there, but I received a phone call that said, hey, we've still been unable to get this patient transferred out. And for my staff that knows me, my famous, they expect me to say, well, I need to get my britches on and come that way. So that's what I said, and that's what I did. And when I got there, there were multiple people from the sheriff's office where he worked, and from the EMS service, where that is in that same county. And so everybody's working on transport for this patient. And we worked on that for a long time, and we were continuously giving him blood products in our trauma bay. And eventually at about 12:40, we were unable to wait any longer, and he was taken to our operating room for some damage control resuscitation surgery where he had an open laparotomy. We did have to remove his spleen, and then there was extensive abdominal packing that was completed. At the end of the surgery, he did become a little bit more hemodynamically stable. And we did make the decision at that time that we would be able to move him to our ICU while we tried to continue to work on transport. But one of the barriers that we had there was our ICU staff was not comfortable doing the MTP. And so we made the decision because we already had acceptance, just take him back to our emergency room, even though that's not our normal process for post-op, but because of proximity to the helipad and just because our ER staff was more comfortable with our protocols, we took him back to our emergency room. By the time we got back to the emergency room with him, the helicopter at the Level 1 Trauma Center that had accepted him said that they were on the way. And so we were going to wait for that helicopter. It was probably only about 10 minutes after they said that they called us back and said they had tried to lift off and the fog had not burned off enough for them to come. And so during this same amount of time, we're calling all over the state. Many of his professional counterparts are calling all over the state trying to find an IFR rated helicopter, trying to find they said eventually that the Georgia State Patrol helicopter would come, but we would have to put qualified staff in that helicopter, and that's a whole different ball game. So we're going back and forth this entire time, between do we put him in our ambulance where we don't think he's going to have a good outcome, or do we continue to wait on a helicopter? The helicopter ended up canceling on us almost 3 times. And so there were some very direct conversations between us and that service of, we need an answer. We need to know if you can come or what we have to do, because I think we packed our ambulance at least 2 times to take him. And the ER physician finally said, Emily, you have to take him. And I said, well, I don't know that this is going to go well. And he said, but you got to do it. And so I kind of walked off and said, Lord, I'll take him if you want me to, but I don't feel good about this. And I called the helicopter service back one more time and said, if we can meet you at the airport with him, could you come with the IFR helicopter and we'll get him to the airport, because our helipad is not IFR rated. And they agreed to do that. And then 10 minutes later, they called me back and said they had to turn around because they had mechanical issues. So I had all of the ambulance packed, and I think not only do I hope I'm impactful with this story, but I thought I was impactful with their service that day when I said, we're coming, and I'd like to speak to y'all when I get there. And they called me back and said, we found our second bird is back, and we're going to come. And so they did finally come on that 3rd time. So total time from OR recovery to the time of transfer was 3 hours. Again, they canceled on us 3 different times. There were multiple calls to other flight agencies. Everybody was working on this. The patient was eventually transferred from our hospital, but he was transferred 8.5 hours after his arrival, which obviously is not ideal. Prior to transfer, we actually transfused 67 units of blood product for this patient, which was about 16,570 cc's of product. We replaced his blood volume almost 3 times before he left from us. And I would like to tell you that the outcome here is, despite all of the barriers and just because of some perseverance from not only the staff at our hospital, but also all of the people that came, that cared about him and had these different resources. There was a lot of networking going on. He was underwent multiple surgeries at the Level 1 Trauma Center he went to. He was actually discharged there after about 45 days and went back to his home hospital, which is Fairview Hospital, where he's from. And then on April the 16th, he was actually able to return to work. So there is some significance to this, and I think Terry Cobb is familiar with this patient, and so I think he'd like to say a few things about him.
Thank you, Emily, and we appreciate the outstanding work that y'all did that day. So I'm gonna ask Captain Chris Bracewell and his family to join us. I've known Chris for probably 29 years.
Stole the truck one time from me.
Yeah. Yeah, I stole his truck one day from the post office, so it had his AR-15 in it. He had stepped in the post office, so I run down the street and jumped in it and took off. So we've got a storied history together that brings a lot of laughs. So welcome, Chris, and I just asked them to come up here and join us today while we recognize the excellent work that was done that day. And we thank God for the miracle that happened that day. And so,
Well, I've told this story a bunch of times, and I try to be strong every time. But it all started with a cup of coffee, believe it or not. Me and my brother was in Thomasville, and we was at a friend's house. Yeah, I don't want to bore y'all, but I'm just gonna tell you from the beginning. And, he brought us 3 black cups of coffee. I said, I don't drink black coffee. I drink Circle K coffee. My brother looked at me and said, well, we'll find you a Circle K. So we was looking for a Circle K when we had our wreck. So I can blame this all on a cup of coffee, really. But, you know, things happened for whatever reason. My life was changed. I can't tell y'all how much support I've had. It just really means a lot for the people that had something to do with my getting better, to hear it from them. You know, I wanted to go to Valdosta. Terry made arrangements to go to Valdosta. I met everybody that had anything to do. I wanted to. I'd like to go to Shands. I haven't made that trip yet. There was a lot of good people that helped get me here. God's the main person. I thought I could be stronger than I am, but you know, it is what it is. But you know, things turned around my whole life. I had a very supportive boss. Terry was very supportive to me. You know, everybody that had anything to do with me, I very much appreciate. I just didn't realize what all we went through until she told us about the helicopters. I knew there was a little bit of a delay, but I didn't realize there was that much delay. But God's blessing, I'm still here. God had me in the right place, the right time, the right people, the right situation. That's the reason I'm here now. I'll tell everybody that. And it's just amazing to me at what between God and medical can be done. You know, I'm not supposed to be here. Everybody says, you're a walking miracle. I don't look at it that way. But things happen for a reason. I haven't figured out why it happened to me, but it happened. And we all dealt with it together. And I really appreciate everything that everybody's done for me. Thank y'all.
It says, presented to SGMC Health Level 3 Trauma Center in honor of National Rural Health Day and recognition of your commitment to joining the Georgia trauma system and providing exceptional care to injured patients, November 21st, 2024. We're so glad you all joined the system. I'm sure he is too.
Oh, yeah. Took care of a lot of people. I'll never be able to repay.
Picture.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Can I wipe my eyes first?
Yeah.
One thing before I leave, I do want to tell everything that these people, if it wasn't them, wouldn't be here. And I know that. And I want to tell everybody how much, not only to me, other people that could just use this all was in place because of y'all. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think the rest of the meeting, it'll all be downhill. But, you know, really, we work hard and it gets sort of mundane sometimes and we wonder if we're making a difference. I mean, this was really, you know, an injection of energy for me. And I'm glad that he had the guts and the strength to come and share because basically, can y'all hear me now? I think they turned my mic on. Hello, can you hear me now?
Is it off? Does it go off after a certain amount of time? I don't see the top of it. No, I turned it off.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me now? So, but I'm just glad he was willing to share his story and, you know, really, we have the greatest job in the world. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So give yourself a pat on the back. And if you're having a bad day or tired of sending emails and doing stuff, just remember this day. I mean, that's what I do when my patients come back to see me in the ICU or they walk in. And, it really means a lot to the staff. It means a lot to us to get to see them. So I'm really appreciative that he was willing to do that. I think we got more out of it than he did. Sure. All right, with that being said, I need to get approval for the August minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
And any, questions, concerns, additions? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. It's, that time of year, usually in November, when it rolls around, that we have, I think it's every other year, officer elections. I have two nominations one for vice chair, Regina Medeiros, nominated by Jim Dunn, and for secretary and treasurer, Pete Keones, nominated by Jim Dunn and Regina Medeiros. So this time, I haven't seen any other nominations by email, so obviously we'll take those from the floor if there's anyone that wants to nominate themselves. All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. I think I'll just vote on both at once as a group. All those in favor of the nominations, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, well, we have a new vice chair, a new secretary and treasurer, so we get the secret handshake.
She'll give you the keys to the.
You're already in his seat.
Yeah, you get a big check with that, big check, okay. So this time I'll turn it over to, Dr. Medeiros for the bylaws update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. That was a great, oh gosh, to follow that presentation is really, really hard. I'm still like all misty eyed. My glasses are all foggy now. I have to clean them. But that was really great. Great connect to purpose to remind us why we're all here. Really has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the patients that we serve. So that was a great way to start this meeting. Now on to the fun and exciting business of the bylaws update. Periodically, we are required to review our bylaws. So we put a group together to look at those and make any recommended revisions in addition to the recommendations from the Attorney General's office. And you'll see on page 18, Commission members of your packet, is the summary of changes to our existing bylaws that we are looking at, we'll be voting on this morning. They are minimal and brief. One was on page 3 and 4, aligning officer and committee chair terms so that they will expire and need to be updated and voted on at the same time. So you'll see that. The virtual attendance policy has been updated to reflect the more current use of virtual attendance to meetings. The per diem and reimbursement classification on page 3 was a recommendation of the Attorney General to approve the ability to get per diem, whether you're in person or via phone, it shouldn't matter. And then the commission member orientation, because we recognize that it was really always done by the executive director anyway. So making that more of a formal responsibility of the executive director in the bylaws. So you all received these within the allotted time frame ahead to review. In order to open up for discussion, I'll ask for a motion to approve the changes in the current bylaws. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions, comments on the bylaws changes? Hearing none. As for we got a motion, all in favor of bylaws with the changes?
Aye.
Any opposed? We adopted our new bylaws. Thank you.
Okay, I think now we'll move into the, executive director report, Liz.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. And I want to thank Terry Cobb because he really helps me keep all this, under wraps with, Chris Bracewell coming today and Emily. And again, I agree, it was so impactful. It's so great to hear that story and to understand the impact of expanding the system and to see that and see somebody walking in here who really did not have had that outcome. And Terry invited me, Chris went back to meet his South Georgia Medical Center team down there, and they invited me for that. And it was just, whoever was texting me about, you should have told me to bring tissues, and every time you hear the story, it's just so impactful. It's just amazing. And he really was emotional meeting his resuscitation team. So that was very special to be able to witness that. And then we came up with this idea to have him come here. So my report is in your packet. There's just some updates there. For the sake of time, we do have an update from Lens Marketing, who we've partnered with now for the past almost 12 months, I think, and have done some great work and have really been able to get some great messaging out. So I would invite, Christine, will you be doing the presentation up to the podium, and Christine can take it from there. And if you can just say next slide, and then that way she can know to it.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. And thank you so much for having us. As Liz said, my name is Christine May, and I am the Vice President of Lens Marketing. I'm joined today by our President, Mike Colleen. And as Liz mentioned, we've been fortunate enough to work with the Georgia Trauma Commission for about a year now. We got to work, we got the opportunity to work together through Lens's work with Morgan Medical Center in Madison, for whom we became the agency of record in 2022, doing everything for them from managing social media, PR, building and managing website, graphic design, placing ads, so on and so forth. And so we got to meet Liz through that relationship and heard about some of the needs of the Georgia Trauma Commission for perhaps a centralized management of social media, awareness and education building, and perhaps some ad hoc graphic design support. So what you're about to see is a brief summary of some of the key projects we've accomplished over the last few months and some of the impact that we've achieved. So you can actually drop down to the slide that says editorial support and beyond that. We began working with the group, creating some editorial and messaging support for them. Our first project was actually a flyer that was a distillation of a lot of information intended to help secure state funding for trauma systems into a very digestible, designed 2-page flyer. But we supply some other support for the group. You know, if there's an ad hoc messaging request surrounding grant programs, website content and the like, we're sort of on hand for things of that nature. You can drop down to graphic design and a quick spin through our graphic design work, which along with social media has been the bulk of our work. We started by creating brand standard guides for the Georgia Trauma Commission to ensure that logo usage, colors, kerning, type, things of that nature, standard, look professional. We did some slight tweaking on the visuals of the Georgia Trauma Commission logo with Liz and Gabby's guidance. But we also did some work, if you see the next couple of slides, creating brand standard playbooks for GQuip and GRIT as well, so that there is a place you can go, a handbook to say, you know, what are the typefaces I'm supposed to use? How am I supposed to use these logos and how not? So everyone looks harmonious and professional. But then there have been other ad hoc needs. You know, we had a huge reason that we started working together was Liz's identification of a need for graphic design support for the 2024 annual report, which many of you have in front of you. So we worked on that for many weeks, laying that out, and then the production of the final digital copy and the printed ones that you all are enjoying today. And then, of course, we're around if there's help and preparation needed for collateral and presentations throughout the year. And the next few slides are just some examples of that. A few weeks ago, Liz identified the value of templated branded email marketing and messaging. So we partnered, we have a media department at Lens who specializes in long form and short form digital content creation. And we created an account with our preferred email marketing vendor to have a branded place that the Georgia Trauma Commission can distribute messages. So you'll see on the next slide, the first example of that was the creation of the GQuip Winter Meeting Invitation. The next one, and actually the impetus for the project is going to be for this, actually the recap of this meeting. And it's a powerful tool. The list that we're originally going to send to is a couple of hundred, about 400 recipients. And we always see when these emails go out, a spike in web traffic and engagement. And then moving on to social media. This is again another large reason that we started working together. Social media is your largest platform for engagement with an audience, with education. Conversation opportunities really exist in social media. So education and awareness was a big driver. We have a department at Lens that specializes in social media. They understand the algorithms and the language of it, and they start by doing editorial planning. So we work very closely with Liz and Gabby identifying important seasonality for the Georgia Trauma Commission, for awareness days. Happy Rural Health Day, by the way. And we have, in the next couple of slides, you'll see we have posted about 160 posts in the last 6 months. We've grown the Facebook audience from about 200 to 931. And that has, through our software, we can measure 68,000 impressions. That's people who've seen it. 4,000 engagements, that's people who've liked it or shared it or commented on it. And then about 1,000 plus clicks from those social media posts directly to the Georgia Trauma Commission website. And the headlines on this for us who do this every day for Lens specializes in a lot of healthcare marketing, chiefly healthcare marketing, but also higher ed and some festivals and really community-based advertising. It's very rare to see this kind of growth and engagement when you're not spending the big bucks. Social media has become very much a pay-to-play space. So when we see this kind of growth, just 16% in a quarter, or almost 10% engagement growth without spending an enormous amount of money, that says a couple of things to us. That says that this is an unusually engaged audience. This is an activated set of people that we're talking to who are passionate. It also says to us that there's further room to grow, right? If you see that much growth over a short period of time, we understand that there's more to get out there and that there's more people to speak to. So that's been an exciting revelation for us, and we hope we get the opportunity to work and kind of further explore that, that engagement. And then moving, and you'll see over the next couple of slides, we did run a very modest paid campaign in the spring, chiefly to grow some of the followers on the page that got about 400 extra folks following, but the growth since then has been organic. And then yes, the next few slides are just an example of some of the posts that perform very, very well. Posts that feature people, that feature stories. The ones like we just heard, of course, those are the most impactful and make the most difference. And then dropping all the way down to future planning, if we have the good opportunity to continue to work with the Georgia Trauma Commission, there are a few things that we want to keep working on. Search engine optimization, you might have heard that buzz phrase, SEO, but that's how Google finds websites, how they rate them, how they decide to serve them as an answer to a query. And the way that you build the site, both from infrastructure and from content, is very influential in how visible your site is. So auditing the website for Georgia Trauma Commission, ensuring that it's getting the best results and is there for those who are looking for answers and resources is important. We also have a desire through, I think, Liz's guidance to ensure that there is as little confusion as possible between the nomenclature of the Georgia Trauma Commission and the former nomenclature of the Georgia Trauma Care Network Commission. So planning for sort of a long form piece on the website that you all can point to explain the evolution of all of that naming. And then, of course, the continued distribution of these e-newsletters is a very powerful tool. So we look forward to doing that. Let's pause if there are any questions about any of those marketing efforts. I know that was a quick spin. Well, if there are no questions, we just want to thank you very much for hosting us today and for the opportunity to work with you. It's important work. It's work that we're very proud to do. And we thank you again.
Thanks to Mike and Christine, because you said that so elegantly, but I was really in a panic because that was right before the legislative session and we needed that one pager and it needed to be slick. And I think like on that, so that was really impactful. And then it really just organically grew from there. We didn't know what we didn't know about how to reach our audience. And I think, and I don't know anything about this space, and you guys have really helped me understand it and helped me figure out how can we do some of the things that we're required to do in code, like reach a broader audience with injury prevention messaging and things like that, where we couldn't spend enough money to do specific programs, but just reaching. So thank you guys for that. We really value partner. Appreciate it. That looks so good. The only other thing that we have to do, if Katie, if you can go back in the packet, it is the time of year where we approve the dates for the meetings for next year, because we are already we're adjusting the schedule so that GQuIP can be back on that February, August schedule. So we are, our next meeting in February is going to be sort of the very big meeting where it's the 3-day at Callaway Gardens in Pine Mountain. So, and you'll see all the dates. It should be on the, thank you. I guess we just need a motion for the dates and a second.
Okay, can I get a motion to
I'll
approve the
make the
dates?
motion.
Terry?
Yes, sir, I'll make the motion.
Okay, Terry, second. Rob is second. Any major conflicts anybody sees?
And they're all our normal rotation of the third Thursday.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Swap you out.
Any opposed? Okay, we have the dates approved.
And that concludes my report. Unless there's any questions on anything that was in the packet, apologies. And we, Crystal, would like to give the, if you can just do a brief RTAC update, that'd be great.
I will. So in your packet, you've got a copy of the quarterly report from all of the RTAC coordinators, and I appreciate everybody taking some time to go through those. The RTACs are doing really great, really important work right now. We've seen a lot of development, specifically over the last quarter in the realm of education. Many of our regions are hosting trauma symposiums and specific trauma classes for their region with really great feedback. So we're happy to see that. The Stop the Bleed program, we had our most recent application period was in October. We received 40 applications for approximately 1,100 kits for schools, the bus program, and then our expanded project as well. We do have some new kit options that we'll have available. So one, we've got a vacuum sealed pack. I'm going to work to make that a little bit smaller. But I think the important part about these two new kits are we have a QR code that's on all of them that takes you to the Stop the Bleed website on the Trauma Commission website to report use of the kits. And that's something that we've been working for, is really having some more data collection around the Stop the Bleed program. We know that they're getting used, but we didn't really have a great metric to capture that. So hopefully moving forward, we're gonna try and make that a little bit bigger and pronounced, so people know to report it, so that we can ensure that the kits are getting where they're being used. And hopefully we can support continued efforts with our law enforcement partners and our fire partners that we're really seeing use these very frequently right now. So that's something that we've been working on and happy to have it there. I think the next one, can you put the needs assessment? The coordinators are in the process of conducting the annual educational needs assessment for our EMS providers. We've got, Lynn's did a great job putting this together for us. Where we've got a QR code in this flyer. If people could hang it up in their EDs and in the EMS rooms at your EMS stations, we'd really like to get great feedback from across the state on what the needs are. We did a needs assessment last year where, of course, pediatric trauma and burns came up frequently. This year, all of the coordinators are using the same survey. So we'll really be able to kind of compare across the state and across the regions, what we need to work on, areas for improvement. It's important that we tell everyone this is a non-punitive survey. We're going to ask what your weaknesses are because we want to support you through education when those are identified, not for any other reason. So we'd appreciate you sharing that. And then we're going to have our first in-person RTAC chair and coordinator meeting at the February meeting. So on February 20th, we'll get everybody together and we'll be reviewing the results from this educational needs assessment to make some formal requests and recommendations from the coordinators. That's all I've got. Happy to take any questions.
That's great work. Thanks for doing that. I'm looking forward to the first in-person RTAC meeting in a while. So thank you. Any questions for Crystal? Yes, sir.
Where did you say we get that flyer to give out to EMS?
It should have been emailed out by your RTAC coordinators, but I'll make sure that that goes out again. Mhm.
Move into the Finance and Budget Committee.
Thank you. We will be brief this time because we gave you all the updates information at the last meeting. Your report's on page 83 for commission members to see what's been going on in the Finance and Budget Committee. The one thing I would just like to highlight before I turn it over to Katie is that the Finance Committee did approve a funding request that came forth from the foundation for additional funding needed for marketing as well. It was a well put together proposal that came forth to our group to consider, and they have grown exponentially in a very short period of time and need some assistance in growth and development, getting the word out about all the activities and things they're doing. So that was unanimously supported, and we just wanted to bring that forth to all commission members so they were aware of that additional expenditure that we will be adding under our contingency funds. Other than that, the remaining work was just routine work, and I will turn it over to Katie just to update you on the status of the budget.
Great, thank you. The first item is the super speeder, and we're showing about 500K ahead of the 2024 revenue. And normally in this meeting, we vote on the next FY PVP. That will actually be moved into the February meeting. We're working on moving away from the all or none approach to a tiered level. So that approval will be at the February commission meeting. We are also changing some of the language in the contract regarding the registry support. And right now, currently it reads that they, up to 2 years, they can receive registry funding support, but we're going to change that to centers pursuing initial or re-verification will be evaluated each year to determine eligibility instead of cutting them off at 2 years. And then the other documents that you have in there are our expense to budget. That just shows where we are at currently with our expenses. I'm not going to go line by line of those. We'll answer any questions at the 85 and 86 and 87. Then we'll move on to page 88. That is our open purchase order summary that shows the open purchase orders we have. There are a couple of older purchase orders. There are projects, and the detail are below on page 90. The Apple one that is showing open from 2020, that's for equipment and office equipment. We slowly draw down on that purchase order. Actually did some yesterday, so you will see that one go away within the next year, hopefully. We have the Arbor-Metrics program, which we all know about. And then also our March Pause program, which we're working on a plan for the existing funds on there, just so we can remove this PO, but keep the funds for the March Pause program. Some other items are IT that we work with the DPH on, so those will hopefully go away as well within this fiscal year. They took on paying on our behalf instead of us drawing down off the PO, so we're just gonna have to work with them to reallocate those funds. And I'll answer any questions on those. We've also included on page 93 our timeline that just shows where we're at and where we're going. And then just some highlights on that on page 94. Next, when we just mentioned the next fiscal year PVP approval will be next meeting in February. Financial reports due to OPB. Those were changes that we made, and instead of having them due in September, we moved those to January. And we've also had some meetings with them already for next fiscal year. And then upcoming, we'll be voting on the initial reallocation plan. And also in this meeting, we do a summary of the FY 24 readiness funding. And that's on page 96. This is where, let's say registry, I meant readiness. The FY 24 use of readiness funding, you will see the most by level, which ones that they indicated that they use the readiness funding for. That's a deliverable on their fourth quarter invoice. We already mentioned the super speeder revenue. This is what we provide each meeting. Shows that we're 531,000 ahead of the FY 24 cumulative. And then in our last meeting, Dr. Ashley requested that the finance committee and Crystal come up with some potential projects for the foundation to fund. We have 3 projects that have been included in the packet, but Crystal is going to go through those briefly.
Maybe just one update too that I think came in before, but we did receive the fireworks allocation, so we have that
Yes,
in the bank. And what was the total?
1.5. I got the notification yesterday.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, debated and debated over a few meetings, and Crystal's done an amazing job putting together as far as for some recommended projects that we have that we would like to propose for consideration at their request.
All right, so we came up with,
Let me just tee that up for the,
Yeah.
that was a good introduction, Regina, but for the commission members. So what I want you to focus on is, you know, we've come a long way with a lot of meetings and how the Trauma Foundation and the commission work together and what our roles and what our lanes are. And so with some great leadership from John, you know, in these past meetings, we've been able to realize what the role of the foundation is and to raise money, but they don't just go out and do that willy-nilly. They need guidance on what's important, what the mission needs, what the citizens need, you know, for funding. So once we realized that, then we came up with you know, the finance committee. That's when I asked the finance committee to like sort of drill down and do some of the legwork for the commission members to bring something to you to vote on, to suggest. This is not a done deal. This is like what we would recommend as a commission. We think is important, maybe 1, 2, and 3 topics or options or funding things that we need. then that will be kicked over to John and to Cheryl and the foundation for them to take back and look at and do the research like, can they do it? What's the timeline on that? Is there interest out there? I mean, there's a process that they'll have to go through if we think we want something to see if it's feasible. And that's really their work. And so what I want you to do today is really listen to these three options, which I think all three are great. The committee did a great job of coming up with some things to bring to you for consideration. And so put your mind's eye on it. What's the greatest need for Georgia? And look at it from that lens, okay? And then once we decide and come to some reasonable conclusion, then we can kick that over to the foundation. Any comment, John? That's my understanding.
No, I think these are great projects and, we've just started to discuss them at the foundation and we find a lot of merit in all of them. This is a great roadmap for us.
Okay. Go ahead, Crystal.
All right. So the first of the projects that we came up with was expanded support of the Stop the Bleed program. From recent events, I think we can all agree we could use more bleeding control kits in schools. So the project was for ongoing support of the Stop the Bleed program, for continuation of support of the expanded project, which of course included public safety agencies, parks, courthouses, et cetera. And then we're going to be doing a kind of a comprehensive review beginning in January of methodically going back and evaluating all of our schools, some who received their kits in 2018. So do they still have their kits? Do they know where they are? And do we still have providers trained in the school system? So I think from that, we can kind of identify the larger need of how many additional kits would be beneficial in those schools. And that would be the partnership with the Trauma Foundation of how can we supplement the 12 that were initially provided with a number that makes maybe a little bit more sense, beginning with our high schools and then in the middle schools. So that was the first project. And happy to answer any questions about that as well.
I have a question. Do we brand the packaging so everybody knows where it came from?
We do, yeah. We do. So the original red kits have a patch across it that says the Georgia Trauma Commission. We do have these other ones that I've just gotten mock-ups done that they still have our logo, but it has the addition of the QR code to report use. In addition to the QR code being on the outside, the directions on the inside now have a QR code to scan that will take you to the same survey or to additional information on our website. We wanted to direct it back to the website as opposed to a specific form, because forms and the links tend to get a little bit hinky, but if it always goes to the Stop the Bleed landing page, then we think that that's helpful. So this was a picture that we found for another presentation. This was from the Appalachian High School. This is Barrow County Fire Department's Rescue Task Force. And obviously some really stark images that came out of that event, but this one struck me as well. And I don't know if you guys will recognize all of the Georgia Trauma Commission Stop the Bleed kits on the front of their plate carriers. That's a systematic win that part of the expanded project, we put kits where they needed to be, not only in the schools, but with the first responders that were going into the building that day.
Crystal, has there been any request from law enforcement for just a tourniquet, not a kit? A lot of cops wear them on their belts. I didn't know.
They do. We haven't received any specific requests just for that, but we don't have a mechanism to request just that right now. Currently, the application goes for the full kit. So that would certainly be something to consider. Other conversations that we've had is once people can report what's used, a part of that application asks what was used out of the kit, that we could consider replacing specific items as needed.
I would, just if I can offer a comment on that, I think systematically, my opinion, we probably need to discourage just providing tourniquets and not providing the additional blood bleeding control support. I think if we only equip people with tourniquets, they're not going to use the basic bleeding control that is many times just as effective. And I think a lot of the messaging from the Stop the Bleed campaign, which is profoundly successful, and I don't want to take away from that, but a lot of the messaging has gravitated towards tourniquet use.
instead of bleeding control as a whole. So I would, if there's anything we can do as a group or as a body, to emphasize that bleeding control is a spectrum, I think will be very, very helpful.
Well, I do agree with what you're saying, because we see it all the time where people get a tourniquet put on when all they really needed was a Band-Aid. I mean, literally. So we see that, and I think we've gone a little bit overboard with our training and saying tourniquet. But at the same time, if a police officer walks into a scene and gets shot, or his partner gets shot, and his kid's out in the car, and he's trying to go find a kid, there's both sides of that story, and I get what you're saying, and I think we do need to kind of, I think the tourniquet should not be the first option for most, vast majority of patients.
I think I've observed the same thing, law enforcement officers with their carriers and belts and stuff that they carry. Some of them have found holders that actually, will carry the tourniquet that wouldn't carry the whole kit. So I think that's where some of that's coming from. I think they realize the need to have something to help in that case, but the tourniquet is the smaller piece that they can add to what they wear every day. So I agree with your point as well, but I think I've seen what Courtney's talking about, and I think it's space on their gear that they wear every day.
What are our options to maybe fashion a law enforcement designed minimalistic kit that has maybe not everything that this kit has, but some of the basic bleeding control aspects in maybe a smaller form?
We've got a great relationship with North American Rescue, and I think that if we can work together on a specific list of what we want included, and maybe that's something that we could look at.
I guess the question is, do we really want to go down that path of going against what has become the standard?
Right.
And I appreciate there's nuances in it, but I mean, this has kind of been put out by the ACS, everyone else, all these organizations are on board with Sue. Want to sit there and say, we think we might know a little bit better. I mean, I don't know if that's really what we want to be going down a different path personally.
I think the solution always has to be education,
Yeah.
right? If we teach people how to use all the equipment appropriately.
If you do stuff with training, it does exactly that. Of course, it's not just tourniquet. That's the last time.
And that's where my comment, that's what I wanted to direct my attention to is, as you put this proposal for an expansion of the program and a need for more kits, how are you as far as resources for additional education? Because I agree with Dr. Todd, the reality is that some are going to use it in a way that wasn't meant to be, but they're dealing with realities. However, from our standpoint in providing the kits, we also have to provide the appropriate education, and expanding kits without expanding education seems to me like it might be a pitfall.
For our participation agreement, it's required to go hand in hand.
Okay.
If you'd like to receive kits, you have to prove that you've done the training for the Stop the Bleed program. Our RTAC coordinators help facilitate that. If they can't find an instructor in a specific area, the coordinator will go out and do the class.
Okay.
So we're ensuring that has to be a part of it.
Okay. And the training network then is secure and sufficient.
It is. Always looking for new instructors, though. Very interested.
And so this would be 46, like whatever number you wanted to pick, you would tell the foundation, I want 1,000 kits, or I want 500 kits, or you want X number. And so they would know they'd have to raise $46 times 1,000 or $55 times. So there's a way for them to know how much they need to raise. Is that what you're asking for? So this is, you want X number of kits, or in this proposal, it's X number of kits at $46 or $55 per kit. Is that right?
Right. And part of this assessment that we're going to begin in January is hopefully going to tell us exactly how many kits are needed in each of the schools. So it would be project support for expansion in the schools, but without a specific kit number. Just we would like for this to grow beginning with the high schools.
So is the RTAC coordinator reaching out to the schools?
They're going to be a part of that. Yes, sir. We're going to have a survey, just like the needs assessment, that gets sent to all of our public schools. And then the RTAC coordinators will be following up with those who don't reply to the survey. And many of them already have great contacts in the school system, which is why it makes sense for them to kind of be supporting that. Okay. The second proposal we had was support of pre-hospital blood product initiatives. So we now know the research is very solid on EMS providers having whole blood on their ambulances. There's a lot of barriers to that, one being financial. The startup cost is about $10,000 to have one setup to include the mid-level Delta cooler, a warmer, and then 20 of the administration sets. That's about $9,100 to support that. And we thought that that would be a really great jumping off point to support pre-hospital blood. Obviously, that's not covering product. There's a lot of other things to be navigated. But in addition to providing a startup for these agencies, we'd like to support them with consistent protocols and then the ability for them to report back to this committee challenges and successes.
Yeah, I want to just expand a little bit on that. When we talked about this in the committee, we recognized that there are lots of pre-hospital agencies who have a significant interest and several who are already doing pre-hospital blood administration. And we recognize that if we're a true trauma system, we needed to try to coordinate and roll this out in unison. So there's standardization and best practice on how to do it. And that's how this came about, is how can we support this initiative that's been shown to save lives. There's a cost associated with, so it was a perfect partnership with the foundation to see how can we raise funds to provide the necessary equipment for a minimum standard, at least a minimum standard with protocols on pre-hospital blood use and distribution. And that's kind of how this came about. So we will definitely have to pull stakeholders. There's lots of places that are doing it, and there's lots of interest and discussion. Instead of having all of these little pockets doing their own thing, if we are a true statewide system, let's get together and do this as a statewide initiative. So that's where some of this came from too.
And then we had a lot of discussion about this, a lot of good discussion. And so I'm gonna throw this out to my EMS colleagues on the commission here. So Courtney was on part of these discussions on the budget committee, but so basically this gives a lot of moving parts here for this one. But basically what we landed on is like, you know, somebody wants a blue cooler, somebody wants a red cooler, somebody wants a $3,000 cooler. I'll be a little bit funny, but somebody, you know, there's different things in the market. There's not a universal, like to start giving blood, you need this cooler or this warmer, and everybody uses the same. So we found there's some variations. So what we landed on is like, we would pick, you can see $9,160 per grant. We would, you know, if you wanted $100,000 warmer, well, we can't support that probably for everybody, but we could. So we wanted to standardize, and that would again come with the foundation. They just need a number. They need to know, I want this unit, this product, and this is how much it costs. And then they go out and if that's what's chosen, they raise the fund. So that's where they come from. What we would need to do as the commission, we would need to provide some guidance, my UMass colleagues, on what is reasonable, what is minimum standards that everyone, you know, that if somebody wanted to go over that, that'd be fine. If they want to spend $50,000 on this for their ambulance service, that would be fine, but we would provide 10 to get you started, or $9,160. So that's where the budget committee was coming from, to sort of to give a foundation. If people want to go over that, they could, but this would at least get them started with a solid product and take some weight off the EMS services, you know, in South Georgia, North Georgia, or even downtown Atlanta, you know, trying to get started to try to get them in the game. So that's where this project was coming from. So a lot of, again, moving parts. We could go a lot of different directions, but we're trying to be fair, standardized, and provide a product that we could all agree. Any comments, Courtney or Terry or Peter? Any of y'all?
I think it's a great project. I really do. But there's a lot of moving parts in rural Georgia. And I know Chad was, for years I thought it was a project that you would be worthless in urban Georgia. But Grady was doing some stuff with it that really came out with some really good numbers because of their They have time issues just like we do in rural Georgia. Their time issues is traffic. Our time issues is distance. So they're same things. The problem with rural Georgia has always been economy of scale, always will be. And where you have the blood, because, you know, listen to about 67 units of blood, you know, it wouldn't happen in our hospital. It wouldn't. I've had some conversations with a young man who's interested in developing a drone program to deliver blood. And when he first talked to me about that, I thought, well, he's smoking something. And then after he and I talked, it made a little sense.
And you smoked it.
Yeah. We smoked together. Like a Cheek and Chong movie. But anyway, so I like, I think it's a great concept, and I think it'll save lives. Quite frankly, I think it ought to be, one of the things we got to have hospital champions too, because we got to get the blood through a clinical lab, and somebody with appropriate credentials will have to oversee the program from that. Clea won't have anything to do with it otherwise, but it's too important not to do, in all honesty. So I support it. I just know that there's a lot of things that we got to think through.
And I also support it too. I think whatever the startup cost is, will be a barrier, for rural EMSs. So in this case, you know, it's a rural county that we were talking about earlier today, but the rural counties are usually capital strapped. So I think this will be a barrier removed. There's still barriers left to overcome. But I think this is a great first step, and I very much support it.
So the discussion, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tracy.
You know, I'm outgoing as a trauma program manager, but after 11 years at Navicent, if I can say one thing, blood does save lives, and we saw that with our Connect Purpose. When I think about that project as a program manager, I have a headache, but it's something I think we can't not do because it's just proven over and over. And we've got colleagues that are doing it in North Georgia in these little pockets. I think by doing it under commission auspices or helping to pull it together, as Dr. Medeiros has said, with state backing, I think it will help push it through the hospitals, the larger hospitals that'll help partner with the services to provide those blood units. That's going to be the biggest teaser from what I understand. Jesse said, you know, coordinating, because you don't want to waste those products. But I feel strongly at a hospital level, that makes the difference in getting them alive enough to the center for the level 1 to make a difference on that they can walk out the door instead of on a stretcher. So I would support it from a program manager, and I think a lot of them would at the level 1s.
This is great discussion, and the preliminary discussions on the foundation side were receptive, but we still had a lot of questions, many of them to do with what Terry just said, and that is, what's the scope of this? Because as you said, some trucks are already doing it. Some systems have the resources to provide it and others don't. So it comes down to what's the scope of what we as the foundation can do, because we want to be equitable about it, and we want to make an impact, but we also don't want to make it seem like we're picking losers and winners. So we'll have to work out those details about when it comes to awarding these grants for the equipment. What's the criteria that we're using to choose one unit over another? That's the sticky part from the awarding of the grant on the foundation side.
Those are good questions. I'll just comment on what would need to take place. There would need to be, if this were chosen, if the commission votes on this one, what we would need to do is set up a work group with foundation EMS and the commission. And we would need to develop, number one, we want to know, we need to describe what the scope is. Is it, and from what I hear from my EMS colleagues, this is not to go on every ambulance that would give blood. I'm not making any statements here, so nobody throw stones at me. I'm just saying what I've heard is that this is probably not just this project, but blood in general. Take the foundation out of it. From what I understand, like in North Georgia or wherever, every single ambulance doesn't have blood capabilities, but there's certain ones or a supervisor, I don't know how it's done, but anyway, there's a certain way to do it. So I think we would need from our EMS colleagues, what is a reasonable standard, you know, is that one ambulance out of 10, is it a supervisor? So, but the little work group could decide how they want that to do and what is feasible. That should be decided by EMS, not really the commission. And then, once you have that number, like, and I'm just making up numbers here, say we need 100 EMS, maybe the EMS subcommittee decides we need 100 ambulances or supervisor trucks or whatever for the state. Then, now we're talking because you don't need to get down in the weeds as the commission, as the foundation and design this. That's not your lane. It's too much time on your hands for that. So once you decide we need 100, or the EMS does, then they decide $9,160 is appropriate. You know, this is the average cost, what we think is appropriate. We want everybody to at least we'll pay that. And then they bring that to you. And then you say, okay, we need to raise, our campaign would be, we're gonna raise we need to raise funding for 100 EMS services or ambulances to do this. And then you can make your brochures and go out and sell that to the public and say, would you support this? That's the way I see this project going. But to ask the foundation to get down in the weeds and decide what goes on a truck, that's not your area of expertise. Exactly. That's too much heavy. Exactly. So I think today we just need to decide on which project that the commission wants to recommend to the foundation. And then what?
We submitted all three.
Oh, okay.
We're voting.
Then I'm outdated here. So, but you get the idea. Yes. And then the foundation can decide how that happens. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
If I could just add one thing to that, to Terry's comment. We've in our region, we've probably been doing this a little bit longer than everybody else. And although this front expense for the systems is a huge barrier, and that's maybe the first barrier. I don't know if in the process, if this was chosen to award those grants, I think the biggest requirement would be that somebody's going to have signed an agreement to pay for the product. Because I think that's becoming our biggest, right now, our hospital is the only level 1 trauma center in our the only trauma center in our RTAC. And they've agreed to supply the blood out of our hospital's blood bank. And I don't know if that's sustainable long-term as this program expands, as it should. I think I agree with everybody on that. But I think that would be the biggest requirement, because you don't want to award this money and buy equipment that's going to sit in somebody's storeroom and gather dust.
So could you estimate what the cost would be?
I don't have those numbers. Certainly our blood bank manager, who's been incredibly integral in this project in our region, has those numbers and reviews those numbers probably daily much to her chagrin. But
In some other projects that I'm involved in, you're looking at about $500 per bag of whole blood, about $50 per bag of plasma per unit.
And then those product costs.
That's just product, right? That's not administration.
And the reason our hospitals agreed to do that is because it's not a mathematical 1 + 1. It's not additional products. We view it as products that we don't have to give once the patient gets to the hospital. And you know, in certain situations, you've actually reduced the number of total products they need by giving it to them early, and that's the thought behind it. And so that's. But you know, those numbers have to be reviewed, and somebody's got to sign off on them to be able to agree to do that. And you know, again, maybe that's sustainable, maybe our assumptions about how the math works out are always correct, or at least correct enough to sustain it long term, but you know, I think as the program grows and evolves in our state, to Dennis's comments and Tracy's comments, maybe it doesn't need to be a per EMS agency issue. It needs to be a statewide issue where the blood is stationed in certain places, and each agency, if needed, would have access to it. I think that might be the ultimate pie in the sky 10, 15, 20-year goal.
Right, I think what we're talking about here is not blood and all those things. I mean, you're sort of at honors level, Matt, as far as what we're talking about. We're just talking about if they get the blood, how do they give the blood with their warmers and things. So we're trying to give them some stuff.
Right.
So they can even get in the game. So I think we're not trying to design the whole blood product thing, which is way beyond the scope of this, what we're trying to do right now, but just give the foundation, can they raise some money to get them blood warmers intended? So we're sort of at a very elementary level right now. So, but those are all points that we're gonna have to address as we move forward.
That'd be the one thing I'd say in agreement with Matt is, I mean, I think you want to make sure that when you reward those grants, that they have a viable option.
I think that's what he's saying. We don't want to.
Because you don't want to give 10,000.
Spend the money to buy it, and have to not use it. I think it has to go in tandem.
You gotta, I mean, you want to look at what's gonna have to be a part of the program. I think that's a big part of it.
That's a great point. You'd have to show you've done your homework and
And
that
you're ready.
if I get
You have
this,
a
I can give the
partnership with the
blood and I have a
hospital.
partnership.
Yeah.
So your form, you'd have to, before you awarded the grant, they'd have to have some checks in that.
100%.
And that's very easy. That's very doable.
A comment you made, though, I think would be really interesting. Maybe this is something that, I think that's working. I think it's you. Anyway, you have a big mouth, so that's not a problem, but something maybe the EMS subcommittee can partner with the TMD group and some of the other things to look at the data behind it. You guys have been doing it for a while. Atlanta's doing it. Do we know, has there been a decrease in the number of blood products? Like you said, if you start resuscitation early, it should use less. So even though there's a cost associated with providing the products overall to the hospitals to help them, if we had data to show that your overall cost of products has gone down, then that would be very beneficial. And I think that might be a good partnership project, maybe to develop some data around this project. Because although, you know, we're submitting these 3 proposals, obviously, you know, they're not going to undertake 3 different fundraisers at the same time. You know, it's just some information for them of things that we think could enhance care within the state, and they could strategize. And, you know, this could maybe be a second project or a rollout project over a 5-year plan or 3-year plan or something like this, where some of this other stuff can be going on. But it would be really interesting to know what is the cost, the initial cost versus the decreased cost in blood products, and what's the net loss or gain over that. And I don't know if anybody, Rob, do you know, do we have data on that at all?
Totally. I mean, our utilization in-house, and I'm sure the same thing for you, Matt, is decreased on the patients who get pre-hospital whole blood. So if we look at that ratio, it looks like it's down. I mean, it's very preliminary data for us.
But interesting cost data, because, you know,
It's
initially.
that big needle with all the other variables involved with the amount of blood you transfuse, that's definitely something that would be good. Unfortunately, there's no way to have a side-by-side comparison group.
Right. Well, you just have to have historical,
Exactly.
you know, it's not gonna be the best, but that's all historical data use of numbers, maybe, I don't, you know, MTP use and volumes and cost pre-hospital and then post-pre-hospital. A loose correlation.
All right, Crystal, you got one more?
We do. All right, so the third one is the big one. So this would be support of a mobile simulation lab. There are a number of different programs across the country, Iowa, Nebraska, and Montana being some very notable ones that have trucks similar to this. Those simulators are dispatched all over the state to provide on-site training for EMS providers and hospitals. And that simulator actually has two different areas. So the front is designed with two slide outs to mimic an ER bay, and the back looks like an ambulance. And with those come a number of adult and pediatric simulators, and then task trainers. I think this was a conversation we got into last night, is the importance of not only training providers to perform the skills, but the clinical significance of when to do them. And that's something that simulation brings to the table. I think that's really invaluable when we talk about managing a critical patient. And estimated cost, of course, there's a lot of variables with the type of truck and the brand of simulators, but around the $1 million mark just for capital purchases.
Yeah, so there are some heavy hitters on the board of the foundation who like to hit home runs and like to make a splash. So I was actually a little surprised at how much enthusiasm there was for this $1 million project. Like, they want to drop the mic on it and just, so, of course, we would need many discussions about who's owning the truck and who's maintaining it and where it's located and all that stuff. But I was actually a little surprised that they were so hot on that idea, so.
It's
I think that-
flashy, it's flashy.
Well,
that's
but
why-
it has the best demonstrated educational outcomes, like evidence-based. I mean, that's really where it's at. And it allows you to combine that procedural piece. And there's even we've even got an intermediary plan. You know, we're always coming up with things. But we can even partner with some other, Crystal and I have spent, she spent a lot of time teasing this out. Existing, not mobile, but really hi-fi good sim centers that you are in our state that would be willing to partner for some training for things like this. That could be a way to kind of gauge appetite and see. And then, of course, it's always, as we learn from the rural resource needs assessment survey, they want us to come to them.
Well, I
They
was gonna
just
say,
do.
I was gonna bring that up.
Right.
You teed that up perfectly as we reviewed that needs assessment yesterday. Bringing the training to them and how they talked about wanting hands-on skills-based training. Accompanied by the comprehensive when to do what and why, kind of does fit this bill. So pulling into the parking lot at a rural hospital with a, flash truck that says, "Thank you, Georgia Trauma Foundation and contributors," kind of thing on it. But that brings it where even when they're on shift, they could walk out of the in between their breaks. And, there's a lot of industry that does that. We have some industry that comes with their big truck and they park it and, you go out and you play with all their new toys out there. And things like that. And it's convenient for them. So you can still make an impact without it being a formal, you have to all get together and drive somewhere to do a formal class. It doesn't have to be that formal. It can be, here we are, we're gonna be here on these days. These are the different task trainers and simulations that we'll have loaded, and you drop in at your convenience in and out of both the physics. It's really hard even to get the physicians in these rural hospitals to be able to attend, like we talked about that with RTTDC. Dr. Vassy brought that up yesterday. Well, it's a great program and worthwhile to do. If you don't have your physician providers there, you're not maximizing the benefit. Where something like this, you can get them in between patients to come out and do chest tubes and whatever it is.
So you could also partner that with RTTDC as an
And
adjunct.
yes,
which
as
would
the actual
maybe-
hands-on.
Maybe drive some of the interest.
That's very learning, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can,
We take our TTDC courses to our referring hospitals. We take the sim bus with us.
Because you have a fancy sim bus. So, yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to be worked out. Like you said.
We'd be
it's
happy to
like,
put the
if we
GTC
had it,
logo on
what
the side of it.
You have to have a driver, and then who would do the teaching, so, and.
Who would gas for it?
Feel
Who
safe.
would change the tires and the oil? Yeah,
Because the foundation, if we
that's
if
not
we
the
had $1
foundation's
million
job.
vehicle,
yeah.
then
That's the all other duties.
what
of
we
the
do, and so we would want to be successful, we need a back end plan.
Yeah,
for sure. And, okay, where do we go from?
Well, and I think it was Liz that just said this, you know, in looking at these projects, we also view this as a multi-year type of process. And so we don't necessarily need to just pick one and ignore the others. We may need to just develop a strategy for which ones do we do first and which fundraisers do we use to fund which project and all that, because all of them have a lot of merit, and we would just need to have a strategy for how we're gonna tackle it.
Okay. So we're sending all three.
We already, yeah.
We did.
Okay. Yeah, this is sharing, following up and letting everybody know, so everybody knows what we submitted.
She actually did what you asked her.
Actually, yeah, shocker. Was that it? I just don't usually do that, so you're surprised.
I'm surprised. I forgot I had.
Yeah, you first, that's good.
All right. Anything else, Crystal?
No, sir.
John, does that give you what you need?
Yes.
Cheryl? Okay. Very excited. I think we've delivered on and given you an opportunity for success. So thank you. We finally figured this thing out after, I don't know how many years?
17 years.
Who's counting? Who's counting?
Hey, we got there. That's what
Okay.
counts, right? We made it.
All right. Does that conclude your report?
Yes, sir, it does.
So much for brief.
I know, sorry.
I hope you don't come in with a long report. Okay, Courtney, we'll go into the EMS committee. You got your report into the packet. I will go over a couple of things, particularly some of the stuff that's something that we discussed last time, and we thank Terry for keeping up last time. Look, I generally get beat up for talking too long, but like Terry made, this was not on either. I've been close to Dr. Ashley.
We have approved our spending plan, we have approved the budget that we are currently spending as far as our education, our ADLS, and our equipment grant. The equipment grant is open at this point, and we're waiting for folks to send the information. It opens on December 2nd, I stand corrected. The information has been sent to them, so the packet, they have to start delivering their stuff on December 2nd.
Yes, the amount of funding they're getting, and we'll send all the application packet out on December 2nd.
Okay, thank you. So that is in progress. The ABLS, we continue to work on that. There is some little bit of, I won't call it a hiccup, but new equipment is coming out. Well, it's not exactly compatible with what we want. And so we're reaching out to the vendor to see if we can get them to make their equipment do what we want. And the particular thing is we started funding temperature probes so that if anybody's using blood or even IV fluids or medications being left in their ambulance, they can monitor the temperature of your ambulance remotely and send that along if it is too hot, too hot, or too cold. Those are being funded now and are compatible with the equipment that we're currently purchasing. But when that equipment goes away, the new equipment is not able to do that. So we've asked the vendor, we told them that may be a deal breaker as far as trying to continue working with them. The EMS education piece, we've had a lot of discussion on that last meeting. Some of it secondary to the discussion that went on here at the last meetings. Crystal and her group are working on that from the RTACs. I've asked all of the members of the subcommittee to go back to their regional meetings and come back with suggestions that they think that they support. We have had some discussions, particularly about burn at Region 6, and I've asked specifically for a proposal from them, and I never got that. Which is that the Burn Foundation do expensive. So Crystal has been looking at the concept of doing a burn course, developing something that we could do in state that would be kind of granted by our association or subcommittee. We haven't gotten to that point yet. Inter-hospital transportation, again, be something that we're looking at. We have worked with NEDA and the folks here we've got a basic survey, we have not dialed down into some numbers. But as you heard the discussion this morning, in the hospital, transportation is a huge issue, day in and day out. And I told Dr. Ashley, when you look at 120 minutes to a level 1 or 2 center, and you ask a medic to get in the back and take care of that critical patient at that length of time, and that's a tough bridge. And one of the things that I thought of that we may now have some discussions is about what would it cost for the helicopters to do instrument ratings? And I don't know if that's a concept or not, but I'm gonna ask some questions about that. The EMS recruitment tool, we actually put on hold. We have done that, last fiscal year. And we had some good reports from it, but unfortunately, good reports in after we had a discussion about funding, so we put pause of that. And we will consider that again next year. So what we are doing right at the moment, and again, my plan in January meeting to set our education agenda for next year. So because Crystal Group is working through it, in our March meeting, we will set our EMS agenda for next year with the input from RTAC and all the 10 regional EMS office.
All right, thank you, Courtney. We'll move into level 3 and level 4 Rural Promise Center Committee. Dr. Register.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present this report to the commission. First off, want to address March pause. Courtney, is there anything you want to add, or, I mean, I can talk about it if you want. I feel like you know more about it.
So we're at and we've got a concept of development platform, and just the speakers do the slides that we've got. I've just got to get together with him, Liz, Dr. Ashley, to come up with a contract concept so that as we use this money from the March pause and going forward, we might end up with a platform that we can use for a long time.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And also, on the topic of trauma education, this actually segues perfectly into what you had brought up with the simulation truck. Liz, you had mentioned earlier the Rural Hospital Resource Survey. That was a collaborative effort between the Commission, State Office of Rural Health, and the Georgia Rural Health and Innovation Center at Mercer. So this was a survey that was sent out to 66 of our rural hospitals. We had a 94% response rate, which is incredible for a survey, as y'all know. And so of those 62 hospitals that responded, the overwhelming majority of responses spoke to, we want education that's brought to our facilities. It's really hard for these rural nurses, providers, and EMS to go to a training facility. They need it brought to them. Not only do they need the course brought to them, but they need to practice with the equipment they actually use. It's not beneficial to practice with equipment you don't actually have when a real patient comes in. So taking those survey results, CRISP and Phoebe trauma teams came together and did a very raw initial training skills lab. We went to Sylvester at Phoebe Worth with a pig that was purchased from a butcher shop. It cost $300. And Phoebe Worth supplied expired equipment, expired chest tubes, expired IO training, or expired IO kits. So everything that we practiced with was expired equipment, so it didn't cost them any money. And we brought it to their facility. And so the ER provider that was working that day was lucky. I mean, it really was serendipitous. It was Dr. Black, who is the ER medical director for Phoebe Putney. He was covering the ER at Phoebe Worth that day. So he was there. Dr. Dent was there. I was there. Brandy Fitzgerald was there. The feedback we got from the participants, which by the way was ER nurses, one of the hospitalist NPs was there, EMS, and then the ER provider, which was Dr. Black that day. And we just got gowned up and practiced with this pig, and people had a lot of fun. It was interactive. It was very not intimidating is some of the biggest feedback we got, that it was very fluid. It was easy to ask questions and pause. It wasn't structured in a good way. And so we really got great feedback. We did this on November 1st, so not that long ago. We're still getting more feedback. But overall, I think it was a really positive step forward. It was really cost effective too. And one of the biggest challenges, like we were talking about with RTDC and all these other courses, is really hard to get the ER providers to commit to be there. But with something that doesn't take up a whole lot of time, so it's not difficult for them to just come, hey, let's do what you have time to do, and then you can get back to your day job. We don't want to come and take up a whole lot of your time. We felt like that helped have the ER providers there. So moving forward, what we hope to be the next steps, if there are next steps, who knows? This could have been the only one we ever do, but we just wanted to try something out. Have multidisciplinary instructors, so it not just be physician-led, having EMS or nurses also as instructors too, because again, trauma is a team sport. It's not just physician in the trauma bay led. There's a lot that happens before you get to the trauma bay. So I think that having a pre-course survey to identify what are some specific areas of needs, how can we tailor this to you, will be helpful. And then also using cases that really happened at those facilities, maybe patients that are part of the trauma registry, especially at this is really focused to these really far outlying facilities, maybe not even trauma designated centers. In fact, mostly not trauma designated centers, these really small ERs that are way far out there, really far from the closest, even maybe a level 3 or 4 trauma center that they might be transferring to, especially to that level 1. So having them comfortable intubating, doing chest tubes, doing IOs, something we learned that I was planning on trying to teach them how to do central lines, but guess what? They don't have an ultrasound in the ER, so it would have done no good. But that's what I think that pre-course survey would help with, is knowing how can we tailor this no more than 2 or 3 hours. It's real short, it's real focused. We're here to help you be more empowered to take care of that next trauma patient. So that's the direction that we'd like to go in with that, utilizing cases that are actually on the trauma registry, that maybe they were transferred to a trauma center, so they would be in the database, and then doing that pre-course survey and having multidisciplinary instructors. So we'll see where it goes. So the next topic on our agenda is a TQIP poster that was presented just last week. We had really good interest. So basically, we presented a poster on how we formed this level 3-4 subcommittee, and the impact it's had, how we had the ACS Rural Focus Systems visit come, and the results we got from that and the changes we've made from that. Talked about how the Pennsylvania Trauma System Foundation came and evaluated our level 4s because the ACS doesn't. We got really good feedback, really good interest. We actually were invited to present the poster at another conference coming up in April. So that was exciting. Good work there. For our PI projects specific to the level 3-4 group, we have the mentorship group that meets every month to discuss the consultative and verification designation visits, just to kind of help share information and tips and advice for that. So that is very helpful to have that mentor group. Then lastly, the Pennsylvania Trauma Systems Foundation consults for level 4 centers. So they initially came in 2022. We've added 3 more level 4 centers since then. So they have come back and did those visits in October, just last month. And we're still waiting for the feedback on those, but we're very happy to be able to provide that to our level 4 centers. So that's all I have. Any questions from the commission? Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Work from the committee, you guys are really doing well. Poster went over well and got a lot of feedback at TQIP, getting my meetings mixed up, my acronyms at TQIP, so thank you. Tracy with the GCTE report.
Thank you. Tracy Johns, Trauma Program Manager at Navicent and the outgoing chair, GCTE. A few things, our PED subcommittee continues to do education on SIPA, which is the Shock Index PED Adjustment. So it's like the index score for pediatrics. They're doing that education with hospitals and EMS. They have done several EMS classes, I think, at the state meeting this past summer. And then they're working on a PEDS transfer rationale or transfer toolkit. There was one that was created by STN, but it's been about 10 or 11 years ago when it was created. So they're updating that. They're just starting that process. And then also they're collecting information about safe transport of pediatric patients in EMS. And so they're going to offer a QR code to the hospitals and to EMS. And just want to report that we make sure our EMS partners transport PED safely in the correct restraint. And if there are problems or they don't know what they need to do, then we can get them the information to do that. The Injury Prevention Subcommittee, some of that has been alluded to. Back to School Stop the Bleed webinars were held in July and August with over 1,500 participants. The Falls Free Fridays and Fall Prevention Month in September highlighted the Georgia Trauma System via bingo size, fall prevention initiatives for EMS and fire. And the National Injury Prevention Day was just a few days ago, 11/18, and there were a series of webinars that were provided. The Education Subcommittee has done a great job this year. They've come up with a Trauma Program Manager Toolkit. So it's kind of like a how-to for new trauma program managers. And so that's in the final stages of being reviewed and commented on. We now have a place where we can have a resource library on the Trauma Foundation website. And so that will be one of the things that is put up there. And designated trauma centers can go in and get that information and use it to maybe orient or just to help educate within their facility or others. Essential Trauma Nursing Skill poster has been created, and that is pending comment. Let's see, the STN orientation modules, that's a new slide set, and there was discussion about that yesterday. And this will be an upcoming request for the commission that we would like to purchase that as a state purchase, put it in our resource library where centers can get to that, and it can be a resource for orientation for nurses. They can use parts of it and slides for nursing orientation. I think that'll only be around $200. The PI subcommittee is still looking at time to definitive care. They have defined emergent versus urgent and time to get out. What they're looking at is for emergent from the time, I believe it's the time they hit the door to the time they leave. They'd like to see that be 2 hours or less. Then urgent is 4 hours or less. Then we've done a literature review and we pulled that together. And so hopefully we'll have that at the beginning of the year to share as a group. And then they've come up with a PI playbook for verification, and that'll be sharing information and what people have learned during their surveys. The registry subcommittee provided AIS update. So during October, November, and December, the AIS is the abbreviated injury scoring. So in our registry, we score for injury. That's going to be updated to the 15 version, and that'll be the first time in over 10 years that coding has changed. As an old person, I took the update and I barely passed, but I did. It's a very difficult course. I have a lot of respect for registrars. But that's ongoing. We've had 57 participants that the commission is paying to do that update. Starting in 2025, we have to use this new scoring system or this updated scoring system. Also, the data dictionary for GQuip and the state has been updated. We have one outstanding change to come, and then that will be distributed. And now our inclusion criteria for our state patients and the national are going to be the same starting in 2025. That's it, except for the request that we ask for funding for the $200 trauma nursing orientation slide set for purchase by the state.
Let's wait because they're gonna get back with we're just
Okay.
validating the cost. I don't think it's gonna be much, but
Right.
I think they were just trying to use the old, what we did for the e-library, which we were probably half the size of the centers at the time, so, yeah.
We have enough in contingency for
Yes.
$300 purchase that we can vote on that at the budget committee. Can take that up and provide the funding to purchase that. And it would be owned by the commission and housed on the resource page for all your designated verified trauma centers.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
And I wanted to introduce Lynn Grant. She's been the co-chair the last 2 years, and she will be the chair starting in January.
Thank you for your leadership. I know that's not an easy role. There's a lot going on in that committee. And so thank you, Tracy. Great job. Okay. We'll move into the rehabilitation committee.
Awesome.
That is not Dr. Ford Fox.
I'm not that cool. So I do need the glasses and the swag, let's be real. So I'm Dr. Rada Anderson. I'm a scientist at Shepherd Center. And I was asked to do some analysis of the rehabilitation data. So if we could pull that slide deck up.
Bye for one moment. Let them know when to advance so they can.
Absolutely. All right, phenomenal. So I'm going to take us through a preliminary analysis. If you have not been part of a large scale data set preliminary analysis, you will find that there are things that we need to fix. That's just the nature of preliminary analysis. And so I'll stick around if you notice anything. I would love to hear feedback. The purpose of this is really a descriptive analysis with the idea of shifting from a descriptive to an inferential analysis for the spring meeting. If you are sitting with a nameplate in front of you, you've been given a copy of the condensed 23-page report. Anybody else who would like to see it, I can share that with you as well. So next slide. We have two big goals here that were both defined by the rehabilitation experts. They wanted to understand patient demographics, medical treatment, and discharge location. And then they wanted to analyze each of those areas by specific patient subpopulations of traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, pediatric, burn, and amputee. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll move forward from there. So I want to take you through the findings of goal 1 and then touch on goal 2, as goal 2 is very nuanced. But anyone who would like to look at all of the output, I would be happy to do that with you at any time. So next slide. Geography was a huge part of this for obvious reasons. And so we did a 3-level analysis of the geospatial component. 91% of Georgia Trauma Commission patients are from Georgia. It's probably not surprising with minor numbers from outlying states. Next slide.
given the intense focus on understanding not just generally where people are, but more nuanced, we also did analysis of counties. And so each of these are the counties that are represented. And about 10% of the patients are from Fulton County, and then DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb counties each are at 6% each. Beyond that, next slide. We really care about people who are in different spaces, and so rurality has been brought up quite a bit. Overlaying the Georgia Trauma Commission data with the USDA Rural Urban Continuum Code, we were able to label where each patient is from. And so 20% of GTC patients are from non-metro counties, and we define that as metro or metro adjacent, because we know people who live in rural spaces that are adjacent to a metropolitan space have distinctly different resources than those who are in a rural space not adjacent to a metro location. The next section we wanted to analyze is race and ethnicity. The overwhelming majority of people are white or Black in the database, but there are smaller representations of American Indian, Asian, unknown race, and other race. Separately, the overwhelming majority of patients are non-Hispanic. Slide. The age distribution, the bottom very roller coaster looking chart is doing a year by year analysis, and then we grouped it based on the Georgia Trauma Commission's operational definitions of patient groups. And so over half are adults, followed by geriatric, and then children. And all of the definitions of who counts where is based either on national standards or the Georgia Trauma Commission's definitions of each of these patient subgroups. The next slide. There's a lot of interest, understandably, in moving into that medical treatment component. And so 25% of patients are at the hospital one day. Beyond that, 49% are at the hospital 1 week or less, not counting that one day, 12% at 2 weeks or less, and then 8% 3 weeks or longer. And then we have really robust analysis all the way out to that tail end, because we know there's people who have very long stays. Next slide. We also wanted to understand the most severe patients, where do they end up and what do they experience? And so of patients, a surprisingly large amount ended up in the ICU. And so 54% went to ICU in some capacity in the data set. And then of those who went to ICU, that distribution to the right is showing how long they were in the ICU. And so if you go to the ICU, you're likely out of the ICU within a couple of days, but very few people are only there for 1 day. Next. Being on a vent clearly is also an indicator of a more severe injury. And so about a quarter of patients were on a vent. And then of those who were on a vent, it has a similar distribution to the ICU, with a smaller number at 1, a peak at 2, and streaming down. And so just to pause here for a second, if there's any very analytical people in the room, we used a Poisson distribution analysis of this, because you can't analyze data like this with traditional statistical models. You have to use a different type of analytics to understand very skewed data. So data that's heavily truncated on one side. Next slide. We wanted to understand, where do y'all go when you leave, right? And so 53% of people return to home. And so that's that. That is inverse. Look at that. I did it wrong. So 47% go to another facility. So of those 47%, the distribution on the right is what type of facility do they go to? So I actually think this is shown better on the next slide. I do not expect you to be able to read this. It's to show the distribution. And so of folks who don't go home, the people in the blue go to an inpatient rehabilitation type center. The ones on the right go to a short-term general hospital for inpatient care. And then that's the inner circle that shows what type of facility do they go to. The outer circle distributes where are those that people go to. And so you'll notice that there's some really heavy hitting locations where when people don't go home, where do they go to next? Next. I mentioned earlier, our second goal was to do a subgroup analysis. And so these are these subgroups that were identified by the rehabilitation division. And then very graciously, the team at Georgia Trauma Commission gave me all of the codes for which those people qualify. And so a tremendous amount of coding went into identifying who these patients are. And so next slide. For the purposes of not going through every single one of these in a really nuanced way, I'm going to use the traumatic brain injury as an example for y'all to understand what we've done, but all groups have been analyzed at this level. Next slide. So this is a screenshot of a Power BI dashboard. And so something that I wanted to do is empower people to be able to look at data in different slices. And so Power BI is a Microsoft tool very commonly used where it's basically an interactive PowerPoint where you can select different slices, different filters, and you can look at data as relevant. And so you could select, I want to know who comes to my hospital. I want to know who is discharged home. You can add all these filters in. And so this is just a screenshot of traumatic brain injury. And so what we did was we overlaid a series of filters based on key components that the rehabilitation group identified. At the bottom is injury date, and this is the 2023 data. And so that's why you see that it's in 2023. And so we also have a geospatial analysis with people kind of being able to understand where are these occurring, to be able to think both retrospectively and in the future, how does this affect individuals? The next slide. This is where we're going to get a little bit in the weeds, so I'm going to kind of glaze over the top level. But this is a analysis of every single thing we've talked about before now, comparing people with TBI to people who don't have TBI. And so what we've done is we took each of those key factors and we did a sub-analysis. We know that having a one type of injury is not mutually exclusive from having another, right? You can have a TBI and an SCI. Often that is true. And so we did the analysis saying, are you in this group or are you not in this group? And then we repeated it for every group because there's so much overlap, especially with patients who have very complicated cases. And so this really shows us, is there a significant difference of patients who are in that subgroup versus patients who are not in that subgroup? And so, for example, the average age for someone who has a TBI is 51, and the average age for someone who doesn't have a TBI is 50. And so this is showing of those different groups, what are those differences? And so we did this for demographics. Next slide, please. We also did it for the patient stay, looking at different factors, again, identified by the rehabilitation committee. Next slide, please. And then followed this by the AIS. And we actually did it for the top 12. 13 through 11 are included. I just, for visual purposes, I didn't want you to look at it's a massive table, but it does go through each of these. And then next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we've talked about the importance of understanding not just overall what are people experiencing, but what are certain patient subgroups experiencing. And so this is saying, if you had a TBI and you had an SCI, if you had a TBI and you're pediatric. So understanding those intersectional identities that the different patients may experience. Next slide. So what we're doing from here is trying to garner feedback both from the rehabilitation group, but also people in general. Because currently this has some inferential components. How are these groups different? Are they significant? But would be much more powerful and I think maybe much more useful beyond having this baseline understanding is to be able to understand a predictive power and being able to understand what are these subgroups, especially in terms of maybe like an odds ratio. So a patient who has X is 2 times more likely to go home. Understanding what that means for people and how that plays out for them. The goal is to have a final report in the Q1 of 2025 and then present those findings beyond these descriptives at the next meeting. I flew through that because I wanted to make sure we had time for questions, comments, general perspectives. While you're thinking of your questions, I want to just say a couple of things. One is for those of you who log data and it may not feel like it ever goes anywhere, people like me really appreciate the hard work that you do. Without your job, we can't do ours. And this is the type of analysis that can be employed and really make massive headway for patients. And so when you're logging all of those things, just know that I'm secretly in the background clapping for you because that good data really makes a huge difference. And then I also want to make a note to say this data is really robust and it took several thousand lines of code just to get it to kind of populate effectively. So if anybody's doing analytics, I intentionally wrote everything with code so that it can be shared so that you also don't need to then write those several thousand lines of code. So if you need that, please reach out to me and I'll share it with you. Questions?
This was honors level.
No, that's very impressive. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. We've never had quite a report like that at any level, especially from injury or rehabilitation. So that's really great work. And you sort of touched on it at the end, which was going to be my one question, was where do we go from here, or what can we do to help? So you want to just elaborate, like where we go from here, a little more detail?
Absolutely. So the question is, what's next, right? And so one of the things, as my role as a scientist at Shepherd Center, that I really pride myself on is that answer comes from the people who are on the ground. And so y'all tell me what you need and we'll see if we can make it happen. And so I think the big thing is I want to make sure that the analysis that is done, it uses very fancy methods, it uses very advanced analytics, that it's clear and it's usable. Because if the analysis isn't clear and usable, then I think it's a waste of your time and money to even consider this. And so I think what would be really helpful for me, beyond the phenomenal feedback that's been received from Dr. Vox and other members of that rehabilitation group, is understanding what do you need to know so that you can make even better decisions. I found myself the whole time all of you were presenting thinking about, oh, I bet there's good data on that. Maybe we could build a dashboard or something. I'm not volunteering, but I'm saying that, you know, there's clearly a lot of data that could be used. And so for me, I think our next first pass is really understanding what is our need to know, want to know, and would be nice to know. And from that point, let's make that the priority for this report. We have moved past the data cleaning phase, which is arguably the hardest phase. And now that the data weren't in bad shape, but had to be transformed for analytical purposes. Now that that's done, we can really churn and burn quite a bit. You just have to point me in what direction you're interested in understanding. And so I think that might be more than a couple minute conversation. So I'll stick around, open to feedback, whatever is helpful.
And your slides that's available on the Trauma Commission website?
It will be, yes,
Okay.
With the packet,
Because
yeah.
I want to go back and kind of look and think.
You're gonna have a lot in common with Dr. Anderson.
Yes, I will.
See the wheels turn. Right.
Are there any other questions I can answer right now that would be helpful for this process?
I think the one other thing you mentioned is we need ongoing support because we're engaged with you to do this initial analytic, and it carries us through what revisions we do to further refine it. But then we probably need it to be ongoing so we can keep taking a look at this, because it's not just one moment in time. It's once we.
Conversation, not volunteering.
Well,
I'm not volunteering now, to be transparent, but I think if the commission deems that it's a good use of time and bandwidth, then I think that's a discussion worth having. You know, we can run analysis on anything and everything. It's just what's worthwhile and what's helpful for y'all to do what you need to do best, right? And very quick anecdotally, my mom is one of the people that I really think was saved by this. And so when I'm doing this analysis, it's very close to home. And I think that's really helpful to be able to see. I will never be a clinician. Kudos to all of y'all who do that. But if I can help with the data to get you informed so that you can do even better by our patients, just let me know what we need to do. So that's not a good answer, but it is a transparent answer. What we'll do next is what y'all ask for. So
she's resuscitated the data. Now that the data's alive, we've got to figure out what to do with it.
very on the nose analogy. All right, my email address is up here. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any wisdom or insights. And then I have a copy of the report if anybody would like to flip through it and talk about analysis, by all means.
She made it replicatable, almost like a proc application
Yeah.
system. Now this is to rehab. We've never had this data before.
No.
This is all secret data. So it's Gina's ESO registry. So it's the high, as she mentioned, it's the high quality, you know, we're not dealing with administrative data set here.
Which will have going forward.
So we
can do
we-
comparisons.
Should we take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
All right, why don't we're running behind, but it's been a great discussion, so I didn't want to squelch that. So, let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene. Let's say, 11:30?
Here's some proprietary information on it.
Thank you. Which I kind of had to do, but.
Everybody's checking their phone.
So go ahead, the floor is yours.
All right, good morning, everyone. Sorry, I can't be there with you in person, but I'm going to be giving the Trauma Administrators Committee report. We did meet on October, what was it? 28th. We had a good discussion. We started off talking about the finance KPI worksheet. The worksheet is to clarify our trauma activation claims, including pre-arrival EMS notification codes and essential billing components. So we talked about the target date as well as just encouraging everyone to try and participate in this with some preliminary practice cases before the end of the year, definitely. And also leading up to the part 2 of the finance workshop. So that kind of leads into the next item, where we have had two different two parts of the TCAA finance team workshops. We've had really good feedback on them. At the time of this meeting, we had completed part 1 and part 2 was still scheduled to take place. And I know that our team here at Navicent has gotten a lot of learning out of it, and we've already implemented some of the takeaways from that. And so I hope that the other attendees feel the same. And then we did have a discussion around the Finance Committee work group. Gabby provided us an update on what's being done through that committee and how they're working on developing the FY 2026 criteria recommendations. And we'll be having an open comment period for feedback and hope to review those at the commission meeting next year in February. And then last but not least, we talked about our committee dates for 2025 and voted and approved those. And that was it. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Walker. Any questions for Dr. Walker? You feel like, Dr. Walker, the financial workshops are your colleagues, is that something that they feel helpful from the commission, or have you gotten any feedback on that yet?
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
I was just following up about the financial workshops. Is that something that it seems to be a positive value from the commission, from your group, or is that, you know, something they already know? Or I was just trying to get some feedback how that was going, if we were giving them something that they wanted.
No, I think that is going very well. I think particularly, you know, we've had some finance workshops in the past, but we all know that there's turnover, you know, within all of our organizations, within our finance department. And so we have a variety of experience levels. Some people, you know, have previous experience, others are new. So that's one reason why I think these, you know, continuing to include finance is really important. And we know that, you know, the regulations are always being, you know, updated. And so we need to stay abreast even for those, you know, people that are experienced, and as well as the changes that are occurring. Of course, we are now, you know, part of Advocate. And so again, due to all of those things, we have learned a lot, and more than ever, it's important for us to maximize our dollars. As we know, we've already, you know, had discussion in this meeting today, and we'll be moving forward around, you know, everyone's budget constraints and what we anticipate in the, you know, legislation and whatnot. So I think this really brings home the fact that there are certain things that are not under our control, but there are other things that are. So this really is giving us tools to be able to optimize our you know, the funding that we should be receiving for the work that's being done. And so I know that, I've heard very positive feedback from those, facilities that have participated.
Well, that's great feedback. So just let us know if you need anything and we'll go from there.
Will do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Walker. We'll move now into the Trauma Systems Performance Committee. Who will be presenting that, Liz?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
To just do it for Dr. Dunn. Just a couple things to update, really. We talked about the, paper that some of these things seem like forever ago, but the collaboration with Center, the Coalition for National Trauma Research, really with under Dr. Eileen Bolger's guidance, we've completed the fourth and final milestone. They're compiling a summary for that, and we're going to get a meeting together with Dr. Bolger, with the folks who've been working on the project. I think it was Kelly Joyner from OEMS&T, Courtney, myself, Gina, and as well as the Center folks, and we're gonna review all that, and then you'll see it here for sure. It'll go to the EMS committee, which we've been updating that group as well. So we're interested in that. And then I think Marie talked about the annual report preparation for DPHO EMS&T, that there was a discovery of a limitation in the data set with respect to PCR reports. Apparently, the centers being on ESO and the state being on Image Trend Patient Registry, only the most recent PCR report crosses over, so they don't get, if you had like a transfer from another facility before, even if it's in the registry, it won't go over. So troubleshooting on how to work on that. And then there was also a discussion about just PCR reports in general and missing or incomplete PCR reports. April and folks, do you guys have any comment on that? Or I know you mentioned that you're trying to figure out a way to identify that and run reports and to the departments.
Yeah, so what we did ask on that committee is for anybody who is struggling, where we think that it has to do with certain EMS agencies that are using a third-party vendor as opposed to submitting directly into the GEMSIS site or into Elite. So if you find that you're not getting or you're unable to locate your PCRs within your facility, if you could just let us know like the name and the agency that you think or could have transported. And then it could be something with the cross between the two. We did have that switch from the version 3.4 to 3.5. We thought we had all the kinks worked out with that, but there seems to still be some issues. Current, not as many as there were like historically, like 2020, 2021. But if you're finding those, we do have an entire spreadsheet of missing PCRs, and our data team, Dipti and Tina Wright, are helping us locate them and to also find the explanation or the reason as to why they're missing. Some of them are an inversion of a name or an incorrect spelling of a name, or some of them are just the John Does and they're not going back and updating the EMS agency once they actually discover the patient's information. So I think just a little bit of teamwork, it may be a little bit of extra work for y'all. You don't have to send it like on a daily basis, but maybe if you just had like a monthly, you know, like, hey, we had this many we couldn't find, here's the names, or here was the agencies. It might be a little more work on your part for the immediate short term, but I think it's going to help us pinpoint exactly where the issue is. And we do think it is more so the third party like system, not the direct entry users that are entering into Elite. But once we pinpoint that, hopefully the work for y'all, the work for us, everybody would decrease, but it will be just a little bit of manual investigation for right now. If nobody minds doing that. It'll help us make this better, because I don't think that there's been many, if any, that we couldn't locate or track down at some point.
And I think through that work that you're doing with the project that you guys have going on, in fact, Tracy updated the group on that too, and how well that's going. I think with finding the reports, you guys are finding out what the barriers are to why they're not getting across. So
And a lot of times it is that third party vendor. I think if they would use if third party vendors would support using the scan of the license, that would help a lot. you know, because that's why you can't find that first trip report is because of the spelling differences between trip 1 and 2 of either name, gender have been wrong, date of birth, and if you don't match up on all three, you're not gonna get them. But DPH was very helpful, and April, that reminded me, we were gonna talk about maybe doing some reports on a monthly basis from Navicent, just to let you know which ones we could find.
And we keep a spreadsheet every time we're asked for them, and we do it in the cardiac world as well. So in it, we're finding it is, you know, it's misspellings. It's another agency that's not putting into Elite directly. So I think it's just going to get better, but we have to know about it before it becomes a problem, because I know Dr. Dunn's project originally was going back years. And I mean, while we can go find them, that's not helping us, you know, in the immediate. So if we could know in more real time what's missing and try to pinpoint exactly why we're not getting them, and try to give you all the tools to be able to get them. I did talk to an EMS agency the other day about the scanning of the driver's license, and a lot of times is that the driver's license isn't necessarily right on hand when they're on scene. Family comes and brings
the right patient either.
Yeah, so families bringing their information once they're already in hospital A, and then, so of course, hospital A to B, that information is correct, but it's like the mystery's already been solved of who that person is. So it usually originates with that very first scene call. And those are, you know, the ones that were missing the PCRs. So it just continued to let us know and let us figure out why. Hopefully, you know, if there is a pattern to it, we can, you know, identify that pattern, fix that problem. And we're always a resource to help you find. I get emails daily like, hey, I can't find this. And Dipti and Tina will have it to them like, okay, this is resolved, taken care of by the next day. So
Awesome.
happy to help them.
Do you want us sending those still to you?
I mean, if you want to send it directly to me, or if you know Dipti or have worked with Dipti or Tina, you can send them to me.
You need a missing trip sheet at dph.ca.
Well, that's why we created a spreadsheet so we could actually see the tracking of like, okay, all of these have been resolved and closed and these are still open. So, but we share that as a team. So we can all see it, and as we find them, we mark them off ourselves. So whoever that you send them to, it gets put on that spreadsheet and we work on them.
Okay.
So you can send them to me.
Yes, ma'am.
And for that project with Dr. Dunn, thank Gifty for, your staff was awesome. We hit her with
It was
a bunch of
hundreds.
stuff, hundreds. And so, we're very appreciative, and, that actually, our data's been collected now and it's with the statistician, so we'll have some information. You can see the result of all your hard work soon. It's on its third edit of going crunching the numbers with the statistician. So we're getting close. But please thank your staff. They were very helpful.
Sure will.
So thanks for continuing to mind those things.
And the numbers, we did notice that, at least what I'm told, is that as time progressed, as we went back to 19 and we worked forward, things are getting better. I mean, we could actually see, so it's like a PI project in and of itself.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and then for the system dashboard, we kind of turned our focus from the sort of clinical dashboard. In April, and I were just discussing the need to connect and get together again and kind of move that forward, but to focus a little bit more on that financial piece with the legislative session almost upon us. And the last webinar that Dr. Walker was just talking about in her report was really to go over that. We came up with a financial key performance indicators, not really a dashboard, but almost like a troubleshooting sort of thing. So we wanted all the centers to pick a sample of patients. We know sometimes your activation volume is just too high to do every patient, but we at least wanted a sample. And we wanted to look at a couple things, namely the capture of FL14 type 5, which during the through the work that Regina has done and Grady, we found out a major barrier that apparently Georgia Medicaid does not recognize the use of FL14 type 5. So here, you know, you'd have to, you know, code it one way for a claim for Medicaid and then another way for third-party payers, and we can't have that. So using Bell
Federally appropriate.
exactly, it's not compliant with
Not-
it,
not
and you
compliant.
see. So
That's something Dr. Burke could help us with.
yes,
Well,
So,
you
yeah.
understand.
and
the
Russell
nuances.
Commissioner Carlson.
Good.
Yeah, because that's Georgia Medicaid.
But we
so-
needed enough data to.
Yes. And it's, all the worlds are colliding because the next thing on the list, the UGA project that, we originally embarked upon because a couple years ago at the start of the legislative session, the behavioral health folks leveraged UGA to look at claims data to kind of find the behavioral health referral patterns. So I was interested to see, well, could they use claims data for this time to definitive care? Well, when we initially looked at it, it was a little bit too problematic to do that. But she's marrying registry data. When you get these Dr. Anderson types that know how to code things and can work with big database, what she has sort of morphed it into was really impressive. I've actually hooked her up with Dr. Benjamin, and we're going to take a deeper dive because Dr. Dunn's got all these other projects going on. So we need to kind of spread the wealth a little bit. And in the administrative data set, FL14 is actually one of the outputs of that set. So we can see everybody that's using type 5, whether you're, because we've got non-trauma center and trauma center. So we actually have a global view of the use of FL14 type 5. So it's amazing when something comes together. So we're going to take a little bit deeper dive on what they're doing. They have already written it up in a couple of abstract forms, and it's looking at transfer patterns. So it's not going to get the time thing, which I know we're going to get there at some point, but it is a more global view of transfer patterns that are outside just the registry data. So it's the patients that are in the administrative data set, the non-trauma centers, which we need to know about those as well. And they have some really great statistical power behind them too. And they have somebody who's familiar with the ICUS crosswalk, so they can actually use the administrative data set on the non-trauma centers to do the crosswalk to find out what the severity of some of those patients are. So this is really exciting. So we're on the brink of something. I think in the next few days, maybe by February, we'll probably have something that would be ready to come forward. So get ready because you're going to look at a lot of data. And I think that's it.
Great work from that committee. A lot of things going on. So thank you. All right, we'll move into the trauma medical director, Dr. Vatsy.
Thank you guys for the time. I'll be really brief. What you have in your packet is not quite up to date. We had one of our first in-person meetings yesterday. So I appreciate everybody that participated there. We had good numbers, really good discussion. One of the bigger discussions we had was kind of a continuation of what we talked about yesterday at GQIP in terms of ophthalmology coverage and the challenges that represents, both from a re-verification standpoint as well as a patient care standpoint. And so we had shared a lot of good ideas about how to mitigate that problem, from contracting with ophthalmology groups for telehealth to maybe some grassroots efforts to establish expert-delivered education to trauma surgeons on what really needs to be evaluated emergently by an ophthalmologist and what maybe doesn't, so that we can avoid the problem of transferring a patient that gets discharged from another emergency department. We talked about that a good bit yesterday. And so a lot of good ideas shared there. In terms of the projects we're working on, we're closer and closer to getting the early transfer recommendation poster content settled on. I had a couple of final suggestions on the final form of that. One of the things that was new to that discussion was our pediatric colleagues from both CHOA campuses and then the Augusta campus of Children's Hospital of Georgia mentioned that we should probably include a second set of guidelines / recommendations for early transfer and how to handle our pediatric patients. And so they were volunteered actively, or a mix of the two. I guess that's up for interpretation, to produce a similar document with that. And so hopefully by the next meeting in February, we'll have at least the content of those two kind of partner posters that we want to send out to our referring facilities ready for review by the commission. And based on our presentation from our LENS colleagues, maybe ready to start working on some branding to make sure it's in line with all the work they've done for the commission. So exciting news there. And just look forward to working with our helpers to find space and timing for our in-person meeting in February.
Very good. Any questions
Got you
for
plugged
Dr.
in.
Massey?
We have you plugged in on the schedule. So
Awesome. Great. I'll be sharing, Dr. Bleacher and I just talked about the day at the Capitol that I'll get some information from Cheryl about details and broadcast that out to see if we can get as many of our TMDs there as possible.
And I think too, Dr. Christie was gonna come and do like a COT, state COT update at the February meeting as well. So kind of share the meeting time with COT. That way
Yes.
all of the TMDs in the state can hear COT activities and we can get a little bit better aligned.
Oh, I agree completely.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Dr. Bleacher or Cheryl or both for the foundation.
Sure, thank you. First thing I'd like to mention is the grants, the foundation grants for this year. Application is still open until the end of this month. There are flyers around the room that if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to information about that process, or you can visit the Trauma Foundation's website. Second is the fundraising, the Giving Tuesday, the Georgia Gives will occur on Tuesday, December the 3rd. And the foundation has decided that they would like to target the funds raised during that to buy the Stop the Bleed kits. And so I would encourage everybody in the room, because we're all stakeholders here, to donate for Georgia Gives. And the early period for that Giving Tuesday is actually already open. So you can already go to Georgia Gives and make a donation to the Georgia Trauma Foundation. Is there a QR code or something?
It's on the flyer.
Yeah, it's on the flyer. Okay. Keep in mind that we were interested in buying 1,000 kits. That would be $50,000 if they're about $50 a piece. So just for perspective, last year we raised a little over 8,000 on Georgia Gives, and so that means we need to step it up a bit. But I think it's something that we can do, and I think shooting for 1,000 kits would be a great thing. The next thing is, and also when it comes to Georgia Gives, we're all stakeholders, but we all have friends, families, and others that are important to us who, if they are inclined to be giving on a philanthropic basis near the end of the year, that we can encourage them to do the same, to support this. This is a very worthy cause. So encourage your loved ones to donate as well. The next is advocacy. And Dr. Massey just mentioned that briefly a second ago, that we have set a date for Trauma Awareness Day at the Capitol. We used to do it annually and haven't done it in a few years, mostly because of COVID. This is a great way for trauma stakeholders to get in front of legislators and for the legislative body to be aware of and recognize the important work that the Trauma Commission and other Georgia trauma stakeholders do in the state. So the details of that will be forthcoming, but the date is January 28th. So mark your calendars for that. That's pretty much all I wanted to
I'm going to add a couple of things right quick, just to piggyback on what Dr. Bleacher was saying about Trauma Awareness Day.
It is free for you to attend, but we do need you to register in advance because we have to make sure that we have enough breakfast. And then also, we want to get pertinent details on everyone who will be in attendance so that as we prepare your briefing packets, we can give you information specifically on who your local lawmakers are, so you'll know who you need to connect with when we attend on that day. So if you will just, I gave you the flyers, if you just flip to the second page, it's got the information about Trauma Awareness Day there, and just scan the QR code. That will take care of the registration as you fill it out, and then we'll send you information, providing additional details later. And then also want you to save the date of May the 17th. That's when we're going to do our next fundraiser. Some of you in here were at the one we did earlier this year at Portia. We had a great time. This next one's going to be at the Georgia Aquarium. I tried to talk to people at Portia into bringing their vehicles over there and, you know, racing them around inside the aquarium, but I couldn't get anybody to agree to that. So the event will look a little different, but it'll be a lot of fun. So if you'll just go ahead and put that date on your calendar. And we'll look forward to providing more details as we get closer to it and having a lot of fun together. Thank you. Oh, any questions?
Okay, thanks. Great report. Looking forward to the upcoming events. All right, we'll move into the Georgia Quality Improvement Program. Dr. Todd. Oh, James.
Well, I guess it's good afternoon now, 12:01. So, I'll keep this brief. We had a big day yesterday. It was a great meeting. We had a lot of participation. And we've already started planning the next meeting, which will roll around February 21st at Callaway Gardens. So I look forward to that. Work groups, we have the VTE and Time to Care work group. The VTE work group is plugging right along. Luke Galloway, our GQuIP research fellow, presented some preliminary data analysis that he's doing on that, and they're also working on a statewide guideline that we will hope to be able to share when that is completed. The Time to Care work group is just kind of getting off the ground a little bit slowly. I know we Dr. Ashley and Dr. Dunn were going to share some of their work that they're doing at their shop with their analysis from that standpoint. The Arbormetrics benchmarking platform, we're working on the risk adjustment model. We have some movement with that. After the last meeting, we moved forward with using Michigan's model. So the Arbormetrics team is working moving forward with that. There is a project timeline that I've included in your packet there that gives some detail on that project. The project status report, they provide that to me every 2 weeks when we meet. So right now, it looks like the go live for that will probably be towards the end of January. They've got to build some additional reports for us for that. So that's where we're at with that. So that'll be exciting to get that moving forward. The PSO work, we're still having, working with the attorneys for that. We've got some contracts we will have to do with the facilities. That's part of the work required by AHRQ, and included in your packet as well as an example of one of those. We've got to have a shared staffing agreement to protect the data and the work for that. So there's an example of that policy and the contracts that will be with some of those from that standpoint. And I think that was all from that. The meetings, like I said, we have the meeting coming up in February. So we've already started planning on that one. So quickly moving forward, and that will be at Callaway on February 21st.
All right, very good. Any questions for Gina?
Dr. Todd, anything to add?
I thought it was a great meeting yesterday, and a lot of interchange, and people were engaged, so I really thought it was good. Congratulations.
Great case studies.
Great, yeah, the case studies were outstanding, and people are really, doing real PI work and presenting the cases and what they've done, so really good to see.
Great.
Yes.
I'm just curious because of we keep talking about February. Has there been an announcement that I've missed or something about like room blocks, reservation, any of that?
Not yet, but it will be coming soon. We wanted to finish this one up and I think Gabby already has them teed up, ready to go as soon as we kind of finish this one up. We didn't want to confuse everybody. Too many things, but they'll be coming soon.
Okay, we'll move into the Office of EMS and Trauma, Stacy Smith.
Hello, everybody. I want to start off with, we always like to recognize our centers that got designated, whether by state or ACS, and Wellstar Paulding was redesignated in their facility, and then Piedmont Cartersville had ACS designation since the last meeting. We've completed 5 consults for level 3 and level 4 centers throughout the year. These consults are to help prepare facilities for designation. And if you know a facility that would like to schedule it, y'all contact us because we're open to do more for 2025. Marie worked with Gina to do data quality sessions this year, and they found good, they had good sessions to make sure the data is up to standards, and they're QAing data and showing facilities how to better complete their data. They completed 8 level 4 sessions and 5 level 3 sessions, and they're gonna work for with more level 4s in 2025. Our 2023 Georgia Trauma Registry Annual Report is published. The link is in the packet, or you can go to our website and just go to the trauma packet or trauma section, and there you can access it that way. In September, our office attended a 2-day registry conference, and then, of course, we attended TQIP last week. For registry updates, the 2025 data dictionary and schema file preparation is in the works, and with it, it's pending ACS NTDS data dictionary. Image Trend is preparing a 2025 Office of EMS schema for ESO. ESO estimates that distribution will happen between March and June of next year. 2025 Georgia Trauma Registry criteria, we're going to make sure it aligns with the 2025 NTDS criteria. I want to thank Marie. She put in a lot of work with updating the facility IDs and EMS IDs. She had to do a whole new spreadsheet to provide to ESO for their new platform that's coming out. So, and then that leads me to, we're working with Grady. Grady is testing that new platform. There are some kinks that they're trying to work out. So we're helping them and trying to navigate the best way to move into that new platform when it goes live for everybody. And that's all I have.
Yes, April.
I just want to add, so when you go to that link for our annual report, I think it was mentioned earlier, but the time to definitive care portion of that report, there used to be an R group and an S group, but one of those is missing because if the patient was transferred from hospital A to hospital B, we did not have the complete record. So that section is limited. We are working with ESO and Image Trend to get that built back into the schema and for Image Trend to allow it when the import comes. But just so you're aware, it's missing in this report for 2023. Is also going to be missing in the 2024 report as of right now if we don't have any other solutions. So just know if you were to be looking for that piece, I know it's a big section. We all, want to know more about time to definitive care. So half of that data is currently missing. So just FYI.
Okay, thanks for that update, April. I think I have a question from Pete.
I do. Seems that one of the biggest issues is, the vendors. I think we have a state contract with one vendor, and if you have Zoll and you have the Zoll suite, there's an integration issue. There's another problem. Have we ever asked the state vendor to give us a quote on what it would cost to get the entire EMS community under one platform in order to have a much more streamlined ability to pull data? And
So It's not a cost issue. Our contract would support every agency to be on board, but because each agency, we're a home rule state, the agency gets to decide. We can't make them go 100% to our platform. Now, if they go to our platform and, it's offered to everyone, we just cannot enforce that. But the contract, the money piece, that's not the concern. It's just that some people do not want to switch.
Well, I'm one of those old customers, and I'd be willing to switch if there was a way of doing it, where the integration between all the other components works within, and I'm sure there are a lot of other providers in Georgia that fall into that same position as we are, so I'm just curious, has there been any late talks? Because this would clean up so much of what you're talking about if everyone were on the same platform.
I don't know if it would clean it up, Pete, and I'm not against it, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the missing data, I'd be willing to bet, is image trend versus image trend. But if crew one, leg A spells it one way and crew B spells the name another way, then those won't link, either they're image trend or what. However, I am frustrated about the third-party vendors. Because I don't, we did go back and change because we had problems. We changed vendors because a third-party vendor couldn't get it right. But I don't understand the tolerance for the third-party vendor not getting it right. Does that make sense?
I mean, I 100% agree that we don't have the authority to enforce anybody to use any particular product. They just have, we can enforce that they have to submit to our product, but then there's that whole data crossing schemas that have to match and the company to company. I mean, it's the same thing with the trauma registry, right? Like, if we enforce that everybody has to submit their data in some kind of fashion to our office, but it has to be, that's dependent on how that schematron's written from ESO to image trend. And it's the same way with the third-party vendors into Elite.
Sure.
We can only ask that the data be submitted to us, but in what fashion, that we don't have the authority to make that as a home rule state.
But if
We
the
can encourage.
If the third-party vendor is not submitting it in a manner that's appropriate, you have the ability to find the agency, not the third-party vendor.
Correct. I mean, there are sanctions and, I'm not in charge of that. Kelly is, and her, the EMS side. But I mean, they do monitor, data submission compliance and, things, actions are taken appropriately, for those things. But sometimes I don't know that it's actually like a person's fault or the agency's fault. It could be like a software issue. And that's why we have to know about it in more real time so that we can actually address the issues as they're happening rather than look back like years later, because then it's hard to say, like, was it, a delay in an EMS provider versus was it an actual software problem? Was it the, 3.4 and 3.5 conversion? Was it, so being able to pinpoint that in more real time would help us. But I mean, we would love for everyone to be on the Elite site primarily, like as the sole vendor, but again, we can encourage it, we can't enforce it.
So we've been on both sides of the fence with that. We were using a third-party vendor transmitting into Zoll or transmitting into Genesis. We're currently using Genesis for our trip reports, and then we use Zoll billing. So we have that migration. Now we don't have the dispatch piece, so you probably got the dispatch piece, but to I think Pete's original point, I think that, I don't know how we get there, but if we get to where all EMS agencies are submitting into the same platform, then, we'll eliminate that problem out of it. It still won't fix the name mismatch or that kind of issue, but we had a lot of real issues when we used a different company to produce our trip reports, to dump the data into Genesis. There were a lot of data issues between the two and a lot of issues with getting the issue's fixed, if that makes sense. So we eliminated all that when we went to the product that the state is using. When we went directly to that for our data input, we eliminated the interchange between the two issues.
And that's an interface issue of the third party wanting to work with your product.
It is. But if you decide that you want to transition, I mean, Zipty has helped multiple agencies with those transitions, Kelly, so they can help you make it as
All right.
seamless as
So
possible.
she's the person to reach out to.
Zipty.
All right.
Yeah, she is our data wizard. She's our Genesis administrator.
So another question, April, do you have a list of like agencies that are using the Genesis product or a list or number of agencies that aren't? I'm just curious as to what that looks like statewide, or 80% of agencies using the Genesis project, 20 software and 20% are not.
They do have that list. I could not tell you that off the top of my head. I'd have to go through some of our Teams folders to find it, but I can't get that answer for you. But more people, I would say, have made the transition to using Elite as their platform. And those that are not on Elite are still on ESO. That's like a lot of them.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah.
There's a lot of EMS agencies using ESO.
And what vendor they're using? I'd be curious to see what the predominant other vendor would be besides Genesis. So
I can.
agencies and vendors that they're using.
I can get that for you.
All right, thank you.
No, that's good. A lot of great discussion. Enjoyed it.
I got one other, I'm not trying to pick at this, but I'm just trying to either put it to bed or not. Where are we with the armband project?
So, for those that like don't know, we may have discussed this. I don't think that we picked or had the best pilot facility to have started that project, because 9 times out of 10, Northeast Georgia is already taking their patients to the definitive care location already. So there were not like a whole lot of transfers. I think there was like a handful, like maybe 17. And then 11 of them had the armband documented, but there just wasn't enough, like quantity wise, to really show any kind of data that would be useful from it. So we're thinking about taking that pilot into a different region, but we have to get a hospital on board to participate with us. Which kudos to Region 2. They're already doing definitive care. I mean, but it's.
Well, I guess my question would be, what's the inclusion criterion? Is it geographical? Is it, because I can tell you, I talk with our transfer center almost continuously when I'm on call. So I know not everybody's getting directly to us, but.
So the way it was, all of Region 2 was educated and trained to put an armband on scene at any motor vehicle accident. So police department, fire, everybody was trained and told that this armband goes on this patient, stays with this patient. Each center was told to enter that into the registry. Some of them did get cut off, and those we will never know about because they didn't get entered. Out of the ones that did get entered, though, there was no secondary transfer to see like how their care would have been better or changed. So, and we just did not have enough, I would say, like to draw any kind of educated or logical conclusion. There just was not enough data. And I don't know if it's because it took so long for the project and it, like it's one of those like out of sight, out of mind. Because it did take so long to get off the ground, to get all the training done, to get all the registrars trained to enter those armband numbers and where. And so I don't think it's a complete fail. I think that the opportunity is still there. And I know other states have done it successfully. And because we talk about it at our NSEMSO meetings, and they actually use the armbands for all of their systems of care to track the, like transfer patients across their state. we need to start it back, knowing how to do it now, maybe do it quicker, pick a better region. I'm thinking like maybe Savannah area, because you're not talking anywhere down there, you're not talking about system to system. Those patients are transferring from little bitty surrounding hospitals that are not a part of Memorial. I mean, even like Valdosta, anybody going to them is not a part of their system, so then it would actually truly be a clear picture of transfers from
Yeah, I just wonder if it would be more helpful to be in a region where there's more than one trauma center. So I do think and that was the genesis of my inclusion criteria question, having anything to do with severity, because I do think our pre-hospital personnel really do a great job about getting the people that are really injured and don't just need workup and diagnosis, but need urgent care directly to us. But it sounds like there's not really a differentiation in terms of severity in that project at this point.
No, because the entire grant for the armband project came from the Office of Highway Safety, so it was originally intended to go on every single motor vehicle accident. Severity not included, that was just the way that project was originally set up, and then we wanted to put it on every single trauma patient if we saw that the project worked.
The hard part is getting it into the hospitals, because you gotta have a place in the EMR to record it. People have to know to record it and know not to cut it off, because typically trauma comes in, first thing you do is you cut off everything. And then, so you've lost that, you're trying to create a new identifier that can follow that patient everywhere.
So that's the back end
Yeah,
challenge
so-
of actually getting those patients recorded. It's not necessarily, the front end is getting the armband on, but the back end challenge, I mean, people would disappear and you would never know how many of those were unless the second center actually
Right,
recorded.
and think
it
about, you
somewhere.
gotta train registration, and then there's a place, so who's gonna record it in the EMR, and are they gonna make a place for it in the EMR? I mean, I can tell you at our hospital, you go through 14 committees to get anything added or changed in the EMR. And so, and it's a system thing now, so it's really convoluted. It could be done, but it's almost sounds like it has to start like at the Georgia Hospital Association level, or with a system, say like if you did Atrium Health, you could do Pole, Floyd, and Navicent. But then you've got to start with the EMR stuff and then the EMS people, and it's just, there's a lot of moving parts.
I think
So it's hard.
from what you're saying and what I see in the trauma base, that's never crossed our team's radar screen. So I don't know how many of those we might be losing that we could get, that may get us over the hump in terms of getting usable information.
You would have to, if you kept re-educating, because you know how staff turns over, whether it's EMS or in the trauma bay, you might could get some more.
Yeah, to April, talk to me offline about who's been involved in that from our facility and.
I will, and we've had numerous conversations. I just pulled my spreadsheet, and out of 128 patients that should have had an armband, we only have 18 records from Lumpkin County and White County that actually we have a successful armband number from hospital A to hospital B for an entire 6 months.
But if we don't record it once we definitively receive the patient, those people disappear into the stratosphere and we'll never know about it. Is that accurate?
Well, we know about them. It just, it'll show that transfer essentially just kind of stopped with, because I'll have the original one if they're putting it in. So that's part of the problem, is if their first hospital stop isn't a trauma center, then we're not getting that first transfer. We're hoping that y'all put in as the definitive care that they received this patient from this hospital at this time. This was their original scene, but it's not, there's a lot of nuances to, like, if you are a trauma center or not, we lose that first half if you're not. And then definitive care, we get the second half.
But is it, am I understanding correctly that you can recapture that first half data if the trauma center has the armband and enters that information.
Right.
Because as long as we can track it, we can extract the run reports and the ED length of stay and everything from the information we get. So in essence, it's maybe that first piece of data would point the finger at us if we missed it, but it really doesn't help complete the data.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was a tough project, a lot of moving parts, a lot of nuances. And I mean, I do think that we want to talk about maybe redoing it, but picking a different area, that maybe doesn't coordinate their own transfers the way Northeast Georgia does, because a lot of them were already coming by y'all's EMS to one of y'all's facilities, or so it wasn't as useful as we would hope. But we can talk about it.
Just, I hate to ask another question, but just a quick, is there anything on the universal ID, UUID, any updates on that? Or?
So we did a little investigation and talked with ImageTrend in regards to that UUID, and that UUID is going to be unique to each patient. It's supposed to not be discoverable whatsoever. And so there is no way for that to be used unless you had to manually enter it.
You'd have to manually.
And with the manual entering and fat finger mistakes, and because it is supposed to be a very unique identifier, it's a very long digit with 2 letters, long numbers, the risk of entering rather than auto-populating would be too great. And then we'd be in the same situation with like misspellings of names and being able to link people that way. We had a lot, because I was like, I asked ImageTrend and asked, like Elite, like what is the purpose of the UUID? And it's just supposed to be like this whole background thing to link people like on a back end. Now, if every single, say the trauma centers.
Same thing. It's supposed to be the universal federal national link number to be able to connect across, similar to the armband, or the very also long hand entered patient identifier that we always get wrong. But yes, I mean, we already have problems with that. I asked him to ask, and he's been asked.
So in the event that, say, like that UUID is produced like when a trip is created, like when an incident is created. So say like the trauma centers, when they do input into ImageTrend patient registry, if for some reason it got entered or it had recognizable patient information that UUID could potentially attach, but they're saying it's probably not going to happen, or we're going to leave it turned off because they're importing into patient registry. But for those that are like entering directly into ImageTrend patient registry, that UUID connects all of their trips, and no matter like from which hospital to which hospital, it shows you everything. But we only have 2 centers doing that.
The reason I asked too is because Equip also has a field for UUID, and it's a way to link as well. And so that was another mechanism to, I didn't realize it was a highly confidential. They didn't mention that kind of thing, the background on it, but that's what they want. Equip wants centers to start using the UUID, but we told them we can't because we don't have it.
We don't have it, yeah. And so we would have to turn, even in our system, we would have to turn that ability on to even view it. And then it would just be something like on the PCR that you would be able to see, and then you would have to manually key in.
Yeah, we'd have to key it into TQIP like we do now, yeah. And not TQIP, but into the registry, and then it carries over. So it would go to your database, Gina's database, and to TQIP.
Okay, any other questions for April? All right, thank you, April. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah.
All right, any other, I have no new business report today. Any other comments, questions from the commission? All right, well, I would like to thank all our committee chairs and all the committees that reported and all the stakeholders that are not here that do all the hard work. And so we wouldn't be where we are without you. And we appreciate you. You've really grown, and a lot of work going on in the state because of what you all do. So I greatly appreciate it on behalf of the commission. With that being said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Second.
Second.
One said go home, so I guess we're good.